Having some technical issues. In lieu of her, Dr. Battle, would you simply just call each member and we will read in?
Alphabetical.
Just start with
Okay.
Or with
Director Hume,
Aye.
Director Connor,
Aye.
Director Chester,
Aye.
Director Miller,
Aye.
Director Said,
Aye.
Director Alt,
Aye.
Director Werb.
Aye.
And the motion passes. We will now move into the information section of our evening tonight. Before we get into the agenda item, I'm going to exercise a little chair prerogative and just take a moment to acknowledge the fact that tonight is the last day of the school year of regular instruction this year. And it is not just the regular last day of school, it is the last day of a most phenomenally odd year. And I would like to acknowledge Dr. Battle, your staff, all of our wonderful teachers, custodians, everybody involved in this organization that made this year possible. You guys have negotiated through ups and downs that were completely unplanned, and we really, this board really appreciates that. This afternoon, completely unsolicited, I got a text from a parent in the district. We know each other through sports, almost never talk about school board stuff. And she just sent me the following. She said, I had a great conversation with someone who is a county social worker. She has 4 to 5 kids and is in the district and couldn't say one bad thing about how the district handles the pandemic and learning in all models. She said the special education for some of her kids was the best she's seen or heard about in the state. Our neighbors moved to Burnsville just for the district's learning model for her autistic son. Just some great feedback. Super impressed with our district. So I think that's a common thing out there, and thank you very much. We'll get back to our regular scheduled meeting. So first on our agenda is to introduce the new 2021-22 student board representative. Dave Helke, principal at our high school, will be speaking. Go ahead, Mr. Helke.
Good evening, Chair Miller, Superintendent Battle, and members of the board. I'm excited tonight to introduce our student rep for the next school year. And our student rep is going to be Zoe Olson. And you can see Zoe, I see she's on with us. So welcome aboard, Zoe. I'm just going to share a few things that Zoe shared with me when we met and we're talking about her interest in this. She did indicate that she was interested because she would like to see more about how the board works, and she really wants to be more involved in the community. We talked about some of the activities that she's involved in, and I'm going to mention a few, and Zoe, I'm sure you can add to them here in a minute, but you know, she student council, youth and government, mock trial, to name a few, and I know there's a lot more that are on that list as well. We talked about plans after high school, and she doesn't have a decision on college at this point, but she definitely would like to go into political science or government. So I think being a student board rep is definitely going to suit you well for those career aspirations. And I always talk to potential student reps about how comfortable they are speaking at board meetings and speaking publicly. And Zoe said that lots of her activities have made her very comfortable with public speaking. So I'm very proud to welcome and present to you Zoe Olson as our student board rep for next year. Welcome, Zoe.
Excellent. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Olson. We look forward to meeting you in person imminently soon. Thank you. And now we will move on to the next part of our informational evening, where we will be receiving a report about the superintendent's evaluation. This is a role that's traditionally filled by our vice chair and was done so again this year. Director Leslie Chester.
Thank you. Chair Miller and the rest of our board. On May 27th, 2021, the ISD 191 School Board and Superintendent Dr. Teresa Battle met in a closed session for her annual review. The review consisted of 2 parts: personal district-specific goals for Superintendent Battle and an assessment of 25 of the many elements outlined in the Minnesota School Boards Association Superintendent Standards. There were 4 personal goals for Superintendent Battle. Goal 1, collaborate with the school board to support board SMART goals around prospective board member support and board members' roles in increasing district enrollment. Goal 2, by February 2022, implement revised and updated district strategic roadmap. Goal 3, by December 2020, develop budget timeline, process, and overview for fiscal year 22 budget. And Goal 4, provide leadership to strengthen school community relationships, diverse communities, and cultural competence. Overall, the board's assessment of Superintendent Battle's performance and Dr. Battle's self-review of her performance closely aligned, indicating that both believe Superintendent Battle is meeting expectations in relation to the annual goals identified for this year and is performing effectively according to the standards set forth by the MSBA. Most notably, both the board and Superintendent Battle noted that she's being highly effective at community relationship building, her approachability and visibility in our schools and community, her professional knowledge of teaching and learning, and her culture of cooperation. During the 2020-2021 school year, Superintendent Battle successfully led the district through the challenges of the pandemic, keeping the health and safety of our children and staff at the forefront of all decisions. During such unprecedented times, the board commends Superintendent Battle's leadership and connection with our students, families, and communities. The board admires her calm leadership, science and values-driven decision-making, and commitment to community engagement, as these assets were essential to her success. Thank you, board members, for your work in completing this evaluation, and thank you, Dr. Superintendent Battle, for your leadership this year.
Thank you. Excellent. I'll pause if there's any additional questions or additional comments that the board wants to make. All right. We'll now move to the next section of tonight's informational meeting, and that is a presentation of proposed full year 2022 adapted budget. Speaking on this issue will be Dr. Teresa Battle, Superintendent, and Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services.
Thank you, Chair Miller, directors of the board. Tonight, Lisa Ryder and I will share information about our recent allocation of federal funds, guidance for the use of the funds, and how we are using the funds for the proposed fiscal year 22 budget. And then we will share the fiscal 22 proposed budget for general fund, food service, community service, and debt service. We can begin the slides, please. Next slide. So as you see, here are the topics for our presentation tonight. We will end with next steps. Next slide. This slide was provided by Minnesota Department of Education to help superintendents, school board members, and the general public to really understand the different federal funds and also the years we can utilize them. And so this does show the different federal funds. ESSER 1, you will see on the left, GEAR, CRF, and then we move to ESSER 2, that's highlighted in yellow. And then to the right, you see the latest American Rescue Plan, we're calling ESSER 3. As we have planned the fiscal year 22 budget, we've been focused on using federal pandemic relief funds in 2 ways. First, providing that much needed stability by ensuring the services and programs we provide to our students and families can continue, and recovering from the immediate and ongoing impacts of the pandemic. In terms of providing stability, we will use some of the ESSER 2 funds, as I mentioned, highlighted on the slide. We will use approximately $3.9 million to pay for staff and programs that are already in place and plan to continue. This will help ensure class sizes stay stable, for instance, and that we continue to have the same levels of student and staff support that otherwise could have been affected by an expected budget deficit. This has all been a part of the budget plan that we have previously presented to you and the strategies as presented earlier this year. Next slide, please. Oh, excuse me, go back. So you see to the left, Federal Relief Fund summary. And so if you click on that document, what you see in the chart, we have on this document, but we've given the public and you the allocation given to 191. We're going to scroll down to the green, fiscal year 22 Federal Emergency Relief Funds. And so this is part of ESSER 2, that we are using part of that $7 million for fiscal year 22. You will see the spending parameters and the expenditures that we have identified we're presenting tonight. Then you go to the American Rescue Plan Homeless, which is part of ESSER 3. We have been given an allocation of almost a little over $75,000. You see the spending parameters, but it's yet to be determined how we will use those. The next allocation is for an expanded summer learning program. And you will see the total allocation is $825,000. Spending parameters, and we have identified some possible uses because this is for this summer as well as, through 9/30/22. Then Governor Walsh received an allocation also from the American Rescue Plan, and we received an allocation of $413,000. Spending parameters you see, and this is yet to be determined. We also received summer preschool funding in the amount of $76,800, a minimum of 16 students. This one we will utilize this summer. It's for this summer. And so it's a 6-week preschool summer programming. Next, we have the governor also gave us one-time adult basic education funding in the amount of $121,145, yet to be determined. And then we come to yellow, the largest funding allocation, $16 million, a little over $16 million. You will see the spending parameters, and what's different about this fund, 20% of your funds have to use for those items listed. Virtual summer school programming is what we're identifying to use it for. 3-week preschool summer programming, field trip opportunities for families and groups, college visits for students outside of the school day, and others to be determined, because this can be used starting this summer all the way through September 2024. So, next slide. So to tell you a little bit more about how we're basing our 191 expenditures. So the 20%, as I said, must be used to address learning loss. And so you see that in the slide. When it comes to recovery, we've identified taking action in 3 broad areas to deal with the ongoing effects and uncertain future of the pandemic. The first area is implementing effective learning opportunities to support students' academic growth, addressing health needs, including physical, mental, and social health of students, and building connections between schools and students and families. So this may mean things like additional staffing, especially at the early grades, where students haven't had as much in-person school experience, creating really robust after-school opportunities, and expanding programs like our Kindergarten Jump Start. It also will mean professional development for staff, so they can best meet student needs, as well ensuring that we have technology and health-related resources in place, and much more. Next slide, please. So once again, to reiterate, the period of eligibility ESSER 1 ends September 30th, 2022, ESSER 2, September 30th, 2023, and ESSER 3, September 30th, 2024. Next slide. LEA ESSER 3 plan has a few very specific requirements that additional ones that I'd like to note tonight. First, we need to create, so the local educational agency, the LEA, must create a learning plan for how we plan to conduct school this fall, and it is a in-person learning plan. We must make that plan available for public comment by June 20th. Now, this is a requirement we just recently learned about, but we will be prepared to present a plan to the board next week at your next board meeting, the 17th, before posting it and accepting public comment. Next slide. The second requirement is to create a specific plan for spending all of the funds that I had on that federal summary document. And that is not due until after the school year starts, but we will inform the board and the public of our recovery plan as we go. And with that, I will turn it over to Executive Director of Business and Financial Services, Lisa Ryder, who we hope has sound.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you, Dr. Battle. As we move forward to the next slide, we're going to move into some of the details regarding the 2021-2022 adopted proposed adopted budget. As we go to the next slide, as Dr. Battle has indicated, ESSER 2 are the funds, the ones that were in the yellow on that original chart, that are included in the current year's proposed adopted budget for FY22, and FY standing for fiscal year. As you see here, this was the allocation, the timeline. We're well within that timeline to be spending it then within fiscal year 22. Many of the parameters around this are the same as they were for ESSER 1, and they do want us to work on, or additionally approved expenditures include the 3 bullets you see there with that lost learning time and counteracting that effect, along with preparing for the reopening. Now this says fall of 2021. We'll be using it for the reopening in fall 2022 and air quality projects, which we do not have any at this moment planned. So as has been mentioned, $3.9 million is planned to be used for our existing expenditures to allow for that continuity of service in the programs. But the other 3.287 mil are going to be used for additional needs and materials that have been identified, and we will be prioritizing as we move forward. Next slide, please. Our budget strategies in building the FY22 budget included right-sizing our FTEs, our full-time equivalent staff members, so that we were, the ratios were appropriate for the enrollment that we are projecting. We are also utilizing restricted funds before we utilize general undesignated or unassigned funds. And we want to make sure we're using strategic use of our federal resources so that we can equitably address the impact that the pandemic has had. Not everyone has been impacted as evenly, so it's a matter of what are the needs. Prioritizing those investments also with our pathways. And this is taking it to the pre-K through 12. Next slide, please. As part of our process, we had a number of meetings with the board where we reported on where there is action requested of the board, along with workshops in which dialogue and discussion was held. As we go to the next slide, our input also came back and forth between our principal and administrative budget team meetings, gathering that input as well as from the public on an online input form. So those you can see are the dates and the time period in which that was available to us as well. Next slide, please. For our budget input, we had various staff meetings, principals, department heads. They all met with HR on their staffing needs. And then in finance, the non-staff budgets were also addressed, working directly with the various departments to determine what those needed to look like for this line item budget for the FY22 school year. Next slide, please. So what we have before you is a listing of all of our funds. This is an all-encompassing total for the entire budgets, all of those that we have. And you can see them broken down by the various funds. We call them funds on the left-hand side of the screen where they are listed. You hear us discuss quite heavily the general fund, but included here on this slide is also all of the other funds, the food service, community service. Our capital projects is essentially the funds remaining from the 2015 bond issuance. Our debt service funds, which is a combination of debt service payments that we have to make yet in this next year related to all open and ongoing debt. Our custodial funds you are seeing them listed here because this is the first year in which they are eliminated now. And that is what used to hold our flex plan, which has now been rolled into the general fund. And it also held our scholarships dollars. And those have been transferred to the Foundation 191. The internal service fund then reflects our health internal service fund, which is self-insured, our dental, which is also self-insured, a severance fund, and lastly, our OPEB, which is other post-employment benefit fund, which does hold the funds that we sold bonds for in 2009, and they will continue to be the resource that is utilized for the ongoing post-employment benefits that various members of our employee groups as they retire are able to access through contract language, mostly for health benefits and some dental. So as you can see on this slide, you have the projected fund balance for this June 30, 2021, which of course is projected at this time because we are not yet finalized with our expenditures. And so as we wrap up this year, you will see during the audit process that will become more of a final number. At this time, it's just projected. And then we have our revenue budget, our expenditure budget, and our projected fund balance for June 30, 2022. I will note that as part of the plan for this next year's budget, we purposely adjusted the current year's budget, anticipating that there would be some savings in various different areas. That change in that projection for the fund balance for June 30, 2021 helps us to have a higher beginning fund balance here moving into this next school year for the FY22 to allow for us to cover some of the over expenditure that you're seeing where the expenditures exceed revenues. We'll go to a future slide here to see more about that information. So as we move to the next slide, we're going to focus mostly on just the general fund assumptions that were made. We have assumed a 0% increase on the formula at this time. Legislation is not yet finalized for the next biennium, so that is up in the air. We will not know that by next week, likely. So at this point in time, this is a 0% increase on the formula. Our elementary class size is still, is targeted at 25.5 to 1, with a range for those class sizes between 20 and 32. Our secondary class size is targeted at 36 to 39 to 1, with a range also based on the subject matter. Next slide, please. As part of our general fund assumptions, we need enrollment numbers that we're utilizing in order to calculate our revenue funds. And so we have assumed an enrollment that would show a decrease of 233 students from the current year. The OPEB transfer, which is other post-employment benefits, this is a transfer that comes to the general fund from the external operating fund, or I should say OPEB fund that we have, where those proceeds are held. And so each year there's a dollar amount that is brought over to the general fund to offset the cost of that health insurance premium that is in essence for those retirees. And so that is a $532,083 amount that is included in the FY22 budget. Part of our assumptions also include the increase for health insurance and dental insurance. So you see 2.5% for health insurance increase and a 0.5% increase in dental insurance premium. Next slide, please. Continuing with the conversation around the general fund budget, we have shown this slide frequently in the past. It's what we call our current reality slide. This does indicate for you the adopted budget column in 2020, 2021. In January, we revised that budget, which is typical in mid-year, and you can see that that column then indicates a reflection of what the beginning fund balance was, knowing the end results of the previous year's audit. It then shows the revenues, but we broke out the federal revenues so that you could tell how much was from the federal funds and how much was more of a typical budget you would see, what you would see from us. And at that point in time, we were anticipating that our expenditures would exceed our revenues by about $536,494. As we revised that, or amended that revised budget in April, this is where we took into account the identification of various different line items that we felt were actually going to show a budget savings at the end of this year compared to what we had budgeted. We didn't think we'd use it all. So we lowered the budgets in the current year to reflect those amounts, which then basically changed the ending fund balance projected and increased that. And so that is now reflected as your total beginning fund balance in the final column, which is our adopted budget 2021-2022. With that, then we're breaking out our total revenues where you can see how much of that total revenue is also federal CARES. So to get the total revenues, you'd want to combine the 123 million and the 7 million. And then you compare that to the expenditures that are also breaking out how much of those expenditures are regular expenditures versus how much are our federal CARES additional expenditures. You'll note that this 3.9 million that Dr. Battle referenced earlier, that is part of our existing expenditures that we are basically covering those costs with these ESSER funds. And so in order to balance the budget, that is included in the 132 million. The 3.2 that you see listed is simply the amount that is for additional needs above and beyond what is our typical expenditures for the number of students that we're planning to serve next year. With all of that said, the revenues compared to the expenditures show that we have an over expenditure of $5,081,823 in dollars that are expenditures greater than revenues. We anticipated that in our planning process. Our beginning fund balance is higher as a result of the amendment we made to our current year budget and the non-spending that has occurred. With that assumption in play, that extra fund balance then is anticipated to be available for the coverage of that $5 million deficit. So what I'd like to point out to you is on the bottom part of the screen, under the third column, you will see under the row that says assigned, you will see 4.8 million, and that is assigned because your current fund balance policy allows the board to assign those dollars for purposes of covering the net deficit that you might be anticipating in the coming year, which is the $5,081,000. So knowing that your fund balance is projected to be much higher in the unassigned column, but 4.8 million of that is what's above the 6%. And so that's the amount then that I have shown in the assigned field, that then as we move into next week's meeting, you will have a resolution for the assignment and the commitment of funds. And that's where we will reflect the assignment anticipated and the committed funds that are typical for carryovers and pro-pay funds. Having said that, all of the proposed adopted budget for FY22 should result in a projected ending unassigned fund balance of 6.46%. We would then be utilizing, as you can see, that $4.8 million row at the bottom under assigned turns to zero. So we will use all of those funds, and the remaining unassigned fund balance of $8,773,289 is the 6.46% of expenditures. As we move on to the next few slides, we're going to take all those complicated numbers and we're going to try and take a look at this more from a visual perspective to give you an idea of exactly what does this look like comparatively as to how the revenues break down. This slide shows us our revenues. You can see that we have our general state aid, our state categorical aid, our federal aid, and our property taxes. Typically, the property taxes are right around 20%, and then you have your general state aid and your state categorical aid. I see that I don't have the percentages on the slide. I will add them for next week so that you have those available to you. Let's move on to the next slide. And now we're going to shift over to the expenditures, and this is now breaking it down by program area. So that $135,767,437 of expenditures, how are we spending it? And so you can see that we have instruction and we have the direct, find it here, I'm sorry, the blue and the yellow. So the instruction is 86 million and the instructional pupil support is 17.3 million. Those two combined are typically right around that 78 to 80%. And then you have your other anticipated program areas that are spent for direct support services, admin, operations, fixed costs, capital facilities, and our long-term facility maintenance and transportation. Go to the next slide, please. The same general fund expenditures, only this time instead of looking at it as to the program area we're spending it in, now we're looking at it by what is the purpose of the funds. So you can see the salaries and wages and the employee benefits and the funds that are spent of the $130.35 million. You can see that over $106 million is spent on salaries, wages, and employee benefits. The other categories are purchase services, supplies, your capital expenditures, and other expenditures. And you can see by the size of the various different colors, the types and, or I should say the amounts of the expenditures relative to each other. Next slide, please. So we are now moving from the general fund and moving to the food service fund. So on that original page where we had them all listed, we're moving down to the second row. And so the food service fund, you can see we're projecting a beginning fund balance for this next year of 1.186903. And I see at the bottom of that slide, it should say June 30, 2022. I'll correct that as well. But essentially your revenues and expenditures compared, you'll be, we're planning to overspend our revenues by about $105,000, $434, spending down the fund balance to $1.081 million. Our next slide, you'll see a unique slide for food service. Typically, this is quite a few more colors in here. The reality is that because of the seamless summer food program that we will be functioning with next school year, most of the funds that we receive will be federal aid in order to run the food service program. So that is unique for us. Not so much unique from the current year because that's kind of how that's been also for fiscal year 21, but it is not a typical method of funding food and nutrition services. So that's to be noted. 3.77 million is anticipated for revenue for food service. And if you look to the next slide, this is the expenditures of 3.8 million. And you can see how this is broken down. We have our salaries and benefits combined here, along with then the product cost of food and milk. So those are the yellow and the blue. And then we have the various different other colors for general supplies, other and capital expenditures. We'll move now to the Community Service Fund. Next slide. As you can see listed here, we're projecting a beginning fund balance for community education or community service of $1.4 million. Revenues equaling $6 million, which is more indicative of a more typical year for community services with the anticipation of programs being functioning and fully in operation. Expenditures being $5.8 million. and a net change then of about $234,245 increase to the fund balance, resulting in a $1.645 million in fund balance for Community Service Fund at the end of June 30, 2022. Visually, we're going to take a look at these numbers on the next slide is the revenue. As we take a look at this, you have your property taxes, state aid, other local revenues with a little bit of federal aid. Community Service does not receive much federal aid. Most of their funding does come from other local revenues, fee-based programming, with support with the state aid that is also provided. Property taxes do provide a base sum for the operation of community ed in general, and that is about 1.6 million you can see here listed. This is the revenue for the Community Service Fund. The next slide, as we go forward, we'll talk about the expenditures. On the expenditures, we have 5.833 million identified, and here we're breaking it down by the various different programs that are functioning within community services. So we have our Project Kids, which is our child care program. We have our school readiness program moving down around the donut shape to the right. The general community education, our adult education and senior program, along with our early childhood screening, our non-public program, the preschool ECFE programming, and the school age youth enrichment. I want to clarify the non-public is something that flows through a public school for serving your non-public schools within your community, and that is a flow through. The state provides the funds based on their enrollment, and it basically just flows right through to the school for their uses as they purchase curriculum and guidance and nursing services through us. I believe that covers all community education expenditures then, and then we'll move to the next slide and talk a little bit about our capital projects fund. This fund has been in existence since 2015 when it was approved and bonds were sold. It is time now that these funds be wrapped up, and so we do need to spend these down according to the ballot language and review and comment that was approved for the funds. So this does reflect an intentional spend down of all of those funds. This has been difficult to do throughout the past year with the pandemic in play. It's affected the ability for us to actually get in and do some of the things that we want to do for projects. So we are hoping to complete that process then as we move into this next school year. Next slide, please. This is reflective of our debt service funds. Debt service funds are funds that we keep a running balance here of 4.3 million is the projected fund balance coming at the end of this year, with revenues being levied with our taxpayers. And we levy about 105%. We're allowed to levy just a little bit more than what the principal and interest payments are. That's a protection in case there should be abatements that we don't receive the money through the counties related to taxes, and we need to still pay our principal and interest. So that 105% then shows in revenues, with our expenditures reflecting the principal and interest payments we need to make for debt. You will notice that those revenues exceed expenditures, and that's typical on any given year. So we have this thing called excess funds that they calculate every year, and you'll note more of it in the levy process when we get into that. And when there are excess funds in the debt service fund, those are basically taken back by taxpayers, and their future amount that they need to pay towards taxes is reduced. So we'll reflect that more closely in our levy limitation discussions when we get into September and in December. For the budget then, it reflects the projected ending fund balance for the debt service funds as June 30, 2022 of $5.2 million. The next slide indicates our next steps. So this is the adopted budget as proposed. At this time, the formal board approval is anticipated at our next school board meeting, and our agenda will include all of the materials of detailed nature for that meeting on June 17th. With that, the last slide, I thank you for your time. And this concludes our report on the budget for FY22 proposed adopted. Thank you.
So Chair Miller and directors of the board, I want to take this opportunity to show my appreciation to Lisa and the finance team. As you recall from the graphic I showed of all the federal funds, so our normal process for budgeting are the funds she just went through for fiscal year '22. And so on top of that process, they had to understand all of the federal funds, appropriate uses, and create codes, and Lisa always helps me with everything else they have to do behind the scenes. So I just really want to show their appreciation. And to all of the budget managers within our various departments, including clerical support, to go through all of the federal funds, look at the uses, make calls to MDE to get clarification, attend seminars, webinars, to bring here tonight. And it will continue, as you see, through 2024. So thank you. That concludes our report.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Battle and Director Ryder. This time, we'll open the floor up for questions on the presentation of the proposed fiscal year 2022 adopted budget. Directors, questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Alt.
Just one question, and it really is more for the benefit of families. It's kind of an annual question about class, our class sizes and versus the range. And we know that, I know in talking with families, there are always questions about the class sizes and how sometimes they surpass the actual range. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that, Dr. Battle or Lisa, whether it's, elementary, secondary, or both.
Director Alt and members of the board, I'll take part of the response, and then we'll have others join in as they see fit. Lisa, Stacy, Sovine. So each year we project how many students we will have, but you never really know until they show up in the fall. And so we project our hiring and staffing based on that. So what's normal in our budget process is to reserve some FTE, full-time equivalent teachers. So in the fall that we can get closer to class sizes if we see there are sections or grade levels at specific schools that need some support. Now at the middle and high school level, there may be some variation, especially at the high school level, based on the course. So band teachers and choir, they like large class sizes. And so you sometimes see higher. And then also in some courses that may be singletons. So if you have maybe 10 or 15 more over your targets, for a class size, it's difficult to divide that into two sections, especially if it requires a very unique licensure area. So we do have strategies in place to address that. And so I don't know if Lisa or Stacy Sofine would like to add to my introductory comments. Lisa, you're muted.
Thank you. The class sizes reflect the classroom teachers, and so I would just like to make mention of that because there are other ratios utilized for allocation of services for EL, for compensatory, and for special education services. Those vary. Stacy?
Yeah, the formulas that we're using are for, as you said, for general classroom allocation. Our categorical funding is in addition to that, our special ed funding, our EL funding, school within a school. So those numbers are used in developing and allocating FTEs, but doesn't necessarily always play out to all classes reflecting that size. Actually, more times than not, we are under, especially at the elementary, that average class size.
Great, thank you.
Any additional questions or comments?
I was trying to find the slide that had the governor's allocation for the APE classes or APA. So you mentioned something about to be determined. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, Director Saeed, members of the board, the information is included in the federal fund summary. So it was embedded in that slide. I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, yep.
So the governor, he has a flexible American Rescue Plan, and that's $413,000. And the 4 areas that we will determine how we will use it based on what our needs are in 191 are expanding mental health and well-being supports, partner with community businesses and organizations to develop summer mentor or tutoring model programs, school-based summer programs into the community to provide opportunities for enrichment. And the last area is provide students with summer field trips. You will receive more information during the COVID-19 summer program report. So we're trying to finalize with some of those community partners. But for our own 191 camps, we're hoping to use some of the funds to offer more scholarships for students to attend our camps. And then we're working with some partners to see if they have open slots in their summer programming, we would actually pay for our families to attend their program. So that's why it's yet to be determined. We hope we can offer 300 to 500 more of our students to have summer opportunities. And the other one is the Jason Sellers is for ABE from the governor's one-time funding, $121,000. And so he will also be presenting the summer programming in the COVID-19. And so, Jason, I know you're here. If you want to answer that question now, feel free to answer about some thoughts about that. So that's yet to be determined.
In terms of what Dr. Battle just iterated, in terms of the ABE funding, that is an amount that we are to apply for. We have to develop a plan, which is yet to be articulated to the ABE managers across the state. Once that plan is articulated to us, we have to apply based upon the parameters of the plan that MDE sends us, and then they will approve that additional funding for ABE. In terms of summer programming, as Dr. Battle mentioned, we work really closely with a lot of our community partners that we've developed and established over the last several years, including the YMCA, the University of Minnesota, 4-H, City of Burnsville, and others, to try to see what programming they have available that is additional to the summer programming that we offer, both in terms of fee-for-service and community education, and in terms of the very robust summer programming that we offer for our K-12 students.
Thank you, Seller.
Dr. Connor.
I was just wondering if any of those to be determined funds, if there could be, if there's room for possibly a parameter for the school board stipend to be determined later for the year of 2021-22. At this, I mean, just something to put out there that maybe can be budgeted in. Back to where it was before I became a school board director.
We evaluate that every year at the annual January meeting.
Oh, okay.
That's part of the regular organizational meeting, so.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Back to Dr. Battle to receive an update about District 191's efforts to implement COVID-19 related educational and public health guidance issued by the MDE and the MDH respectively.
Thank you, Chair Miller, directors of the board. Tonight, along with Bernie Bean and Jason Sellers, we will share information related to Minnesota Department of Education and Minnesota Department of Health, summer programming guidance, and our plan for mitigation strategies to prevent the spread of coronavirus for our summer programming. We will provide information regarding the summer programming, and I'll end with a little note about graduation. This has been a week of celebration, and so I'll share a little bit more information about that. So as normal, first I'll share the Dakota County and Scott County confirmed case numbers. This represents the time period from 5/16 to 5/29. Dakota County is at 11.55, a decrease from 18.17. Scott County is at 10.04, a decrease from 16.32. A little bit about summer guidance before I turn it over to Bernie Bean, who will share additional analysis of the county data, and then she will share our plan for submitting our mitigation strategies to MDE for the summer. So the summer guidance required in the area of face coverings by CDC, and it's required to wear face coverings on all public transportation, and that includes school buses. So that is mandated. We also must handle a suspected or confirmed case of coronavirus and report it to the Minnesota Department of Health. And so our nurses and health assistants will continue that process of reporting and contact tracing. And then we must have a COVID-19 safety plan for the summer, which includes strategies for universal and correct use of masks, physical distancing, hand washing, and respiratory etiquette, cleaning and maintaining our facilities, and as I mentioned, contact tracing. And schools who provide in-person instruction should prioritize 2 prevention strategies: universal and correct use of masks. Physical distancing should be maximized to the greatest extent possible. And so that moved, all of those I mentioned moved into recommendations, and it's up to the local school districts to determine. And that's what we put in the plan. And so with that, I'll turn it over to our lead school nurse, Bernie Bean.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. Good evening, Chair Miller and Board of Directors. As far as the positivity rate, in Minnesota, the positivity rate is 2.2%. That's a decrease from 3.3 last week. Dakota County and Scott County last week were at 3.5%, and this week Dakota County is at 2.2%, and Scott County is at 2.3%. In terms of case investigations that we have done during that 14-day time period, which is May 16th to May 29th, Health Services completed 3 case investigations for individuals that were positive in our buildings. The period prior to this current 14-day, we also completed 3 investigations. For the next time period, which is May 23rd to June 5th, Health Services will have completed 0 case investigations. That's good news. However, COVID is still present, and we still need to continue to be COVID aware. This week, Health Services did complete a couple case investigations, so we do still need to be mindful of COVID in the community. Additional Dakota County data, their 7-day average is at 15 new cases per day, which is down from 19 last week. There has been no long-term care cases this week, and there has been 2 deaths in our community this week, though. In terms of vaccination, June 7th is a milestone for Dakota County. They reached 70% vaccination rate for residents over the age of 16 for completing at least 1 dose of the vaccine. Scott County is currently at 66%. For our students 12 to 15 years of age that have received at least 1 dose of vaccine, for Dakota County, that rate is 34.7%, And for Scott County, it is 37%. Dakota County has been using our Metcalf School for a vaccination site. They will be closing their use at that building on June 14th, and they're transitioning back to their service centers in Dakota County, which are in Apple Valley and Mendota Heights. Both Scott County and Dakota County will continue to provide opportunities for vaccination to residents, whether it's through their mobile unit or at their clinic sites. As a district, we will continue to provide these resources to families for vaccination opportunities. Now on to summer guidance. As Dr. Battle said, the guidance came out on May 27th, and it included 3 requirements, which Dr. Battle reviewed, but it also included strong recommendations. In other words, the best practices for preventing the transmission of COVID based on what we know about COVID during this journey. Creating the summer guidance was based on 3 principles. The first and the most obvious is District 191 has done an amazing job supporting not only the health and safety of our students and staff, but the community at large. Our success could not have happened without the partnership of our community and our families. The other principle is reviewing summer as a transition period into a period to the fall where we can envision a normal in-person learning atmosphere for our students. During the summer, we will continue to collect data, and we will continue to do case investigations and use that information to help in the fall planning and best practices. Most importantly, we have a public health responsibility to continue to protect the most vulnerable. In other terms, those students who do not have the opportunity at this time for vaccination. After the plan was developed, it was reviewed. It was reviewed by Dakota and Scott County Public Health. It was reviewed by summer program coordinators within our district. It was also reviewed by our regional team representative. This plan was also reviewed by the COVID Advisory Committee. The mitigation strategies that I will briefly touch on will be phase coverings, physical distancing and cohorting, transportation, health screening, and handling a suspected case. As we have learned with COVID, this plan is subject to change based on the changing health conditions and guidance from local public health, MDH, and CDC. Face coverings. They will be required on school buses. They will be required for indoor programming for all preschool, elementary school students and staff, unless they can maintain 6 feet. We will work with staff to facilitate distance so the children will be able to remove those masks during the school day and to use our outside learning environment where masks can be removed. Face coverings will also be required for indoor programming for all middle school students and staff unless they can maintain 6 feet. This mask requirement for middle school and for elementary school will be reevaluated mid-summer programming. What we know for our 12-year-olds is the earliest date vaccine was available to them was May 12th. So the earliest that they will have a student that had a vaccine on May 12th will be completely vaccinated is June 17th. So reevaluating mid-programming makes sense. The other requirement for face coverings will be visitors in preschool, elementary, and middle school programs where students are present. Strongly recommended face covering will be for students, staff, and visitors who have not been completely vaccinated, have been advised by their medical provider, or they are displaying COVID symptoms. Physical distancing and cohorting. We're going to continue to strive high try to reach that 6 feet of keeping distance between students whenever it is possible. And we also will continue to strive to have cohorts so we prevent that intermingling of groups. Transportation. The bus capacity for secondary students is going to be increased to 45 to be consistent with our elementary students' bus capacity. Okay. With health screening and handling a suspected case, health services will continue to use the decision tree as a guidance when staff and students are ill, and we will continue to have that direct communication, education with families to individualize the plan for their student. Health services will also continue to report all positive cases to MDH and communicate that to the school community. We will also work with families to individualize the next steps for their student in that situation. We will also individualize plans for students or staff that have been identified as a close contact and provide them with the options for quarantining that will work best for their family. In closing, on behalf of Stephanie White, the COVID coordinator, and myself, we would like to thank students, staff, parents, and the community for partnering with us during this journey and supporting health and safety. Mostly, we would like to thank Dr. Battle. Her strong leadership and trust in her school teams and the health experts for guidance led us successfully through a pandemic. Under her guidance, we as a school community can be proud to say we started the year Burnsville strong and we ended Burnsville strong. Thank you. And now I will turn it over to Jason to talk a little bit about summer programming.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Board Chair Miller, Superintendent Battle, and Board of Directors. In your board packet, you will see the following presentation. 2 summers ago, we implemented a very robust summer program that included 24 days of programming for a month and a half, Monday through Thursday, for 8 hours a day. That programming included 120-minute literacy blocks, 90-minute math blocks, 60-minute specialists, and 60-minute enrichment time with breakfast and lunch wrapped around. This summer, we took that same program. We worked with our partners in the district, including CISA, special ed, food service, buildings, operations and grounds, and our community service department to take that program and enhance it even further. In the presentation, you will have the opportunity to see some of the parent and student feedback. You'll have an opportunity to see our goals and philosophy behind the summer programming. I'll briefly discuss some of the professional development that'll be held in order to be able to facilitate summer programming. We'll talk about some of the schedules and locations for the Area Learning Center programming, that is K-12. We'll also talk about some of the student supports and personalized learning opportunities that we're trying to embed this summer. In addition to that, Tom Umhofer will be discussing the Project Kids, EDGE, and other preschool programming. Specifically, the goals of our summer programming include, most importantly, providing hands-on, standards-aligned, project-based learning opportunities. Our goal is to engage in our students' learning in the outside classroom as much as possible. To get out of the classroom and explore nature and our natural world. Second, we want to integrate individual targeted learning instruction aligned to student needs. That's the purpose of extended year targeted services. Third, we absolutely want to integrate explicit phonics instruction. That is planned to happen in kindergarten and first grade. That is because of the great partnership with Director Oftedal and her team, Bethany Van Osdal, to be able to bring this instruction to our kindergarten and first grade students. Fourth, we want to provide additional instructional opportunities for English learners, our special education students, and students that are requiring intervention in both math and literacy. Finally, our programs include academics, they include enrichment, and they also include credit recovery. In terms of parent and student feedback, what we have heard from our parents and our students in terms of our PALS and BYC parents and students is that they really wanted us to provide in-person active learning opportunities. Of course, they wanted field trips. We typically do offer 4 field trips in the summer for our elementary students, 2 field trips for our middle school students, and we try to offer field trips for our 8th grade STEM Academy, and then credit recovery is on site the entire time. Third, our parents really want full day programming. Once again, we will be providing that full day program from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock, Monday through Thursday for a month and a half. And the fourth piece of feedback that we received very loud and very clear from our community and our parents, we really want summer to be fun, and we want less Chromebook time because they've had a lot of Chromebook time this year. In terms of staff professional development, for K-7 staff, we provide 2 days of workshop time. In that workshop time, we will train both in-district staff that need it, and especially our out-district staff that require literacy intervention training and other technology training. For the 8th grade STEM Academy, those teachers who will be working with our transitioning students from 8th to 9th grade to earn up to 2 credits before they ever attend high school, they'll receive a day of staff development. And for the credit recovery program, our team at the high school provides a day. Staff development includes lots of different pieces. Specifically, we do look at student data and review and assess the need of the students that are in front of us. We try to design as much as possible targeted, individualized instruction for them. Of course, we review the curriculum. Every year, we have a large number of teachers and staff that want to work with kids, but work outside of our district. I would say this, that we have a lot of staff that year over year come back and work for us that are outside of our district. We also provide student support planning. We communicate with parents and students during that time, and we review our protocols around student engagement, including PBIS. This particular slide lays out the different locations that we provide our Area Learning Center summer programming. At Vista View, that is a new site for us this year. That site was opened because it became very readily apparent almost immediately once registration was opened that we were not going to have capacity at Hidden Valley given current COVID and summer COVID restrictions around social distancing. If we would not have opened up the Vista View location, we would not be able to serve those 428 students. One thing I would mention about the numbers on this slide is that the numbers are somewhat fluid. They do change from day to day based upon parents enrolling, disenrolling, and trying to move students into different programs. So Vista View, Hidden Valley, and Eagle Ridge, I would like to highlight that at Vista View, for the very first time, we are integrating our pre-K programming. It'll be 6 weeks. They'll be in the same building as the kindergartners and the first graders. In addition, at all 3 of these sites, for the very first time, we are integrating our special education support for students. That is purposeful, and with the cooperation of Stephanie White and her special education team, we've been able to make this happen. In terms of Burnsville High School, currently, as of this morning, we have 53 students that are registered for the 8th grade STEM program. In terms of the credit recovery program, you can see the breakdowns by grade level. And again, some of these breakdowns in terms of numbers are a little bit fluid and do change from day to day. In addition to all of the in-person programming, we are trying to offer a virtual-only option for our students and our families. There were many families that reached out and indicated that that is what they preferred for this summer, and we were able to staff it and to utilize curriculum that we developed last summer and expand upon it. If you recall, last summer when I was in front of you presenting, MDE only allowed us to run a 4-week program for all K-7 students. And so we had developed curriculum for that program that was based upon our original summer school curriculum the previous year. This year, we've taken that same curriculum that parents and students really enjoyed last summer, and we expanded it another 2 weeks. All told, we have a little over 1,800 students, K-12 in Area Learning Center programming, that will be in our schools this summer at various sites. We will have a little bit over 180 staff that we've hired to support those students in those programs. All of the learners in every single Area Learning Center program are required by statute to complete a continual learning plan. CLPs measure growth in the programming that they are experiencing in summer. Specifically, goals include literacy, math, and social emotional. In addition, we are required by statute to share these continual learning plans with parents at the completion of summer programming, and that's something we've done for the past 4 years. One piece that is new this summer is we are, as I mentioned earlier, partnering and leaning on our partners in CISA, particularly Director Othedal and Bethany Van Osdal, to implement explicit phonics instruction for our kindergarten and first graders. There are other supports that we do provide in summer. We provide additional ESL staff that we use to target student academic achievement and accelerate their learning. We do provide additional special education staff. This is staff that is outside of the special education summer programming that Stephanie White and her team will be providing. So it's in addition to. We provide additional intervention staff, and we applied early on, and we have been assigned 4 AmeriCorps members that have already been put to work. At this point, I'll turn it over to Director Tom Umhofer to describe Project Kids, the Edge of Preschool.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, board members and Superintendent Battle for the opportunity. Real quickly, it's been a difficult 14 months for everybody. Many families have made many difficult choices over the time and how they interact with the rest of their community. Getting students of all ages back into programming has been a challenge, and I'm excited to say that our students and families appear to be returning to our programming, which is really nice to see. I will summarize really quickly. I wanted to give Jason as much time as possible. We have over 1,300 students this summer involved in Project Kids, community education enrichment, Blaze camps, Gifted and Talented Institute, preschool, childcare. Over half of our school-age childcare students are participating in the virtual academy, which is, I think it's a really nice option for us to be able to incorporate this year. That's new for us. We've had a number of new agencies supporting our efforts this summer, including Families and Individuals Sharing Hope, U+ Care, Minnesota Gifted and Talented Council, and a grant from NASA for some STEM camps that we're offering. So I'm really looking forward to what's happening in our community this summer and in our buildings. I'm also really excited about the prospect of preschool incorporated with the VistaView program and what Jason alluded to earlier. It's an important step towards pre-K alignment with our students, kindergarten, first grade, sharing schedules, space, specialists, getting those kids used to the school routine and regimen and what they can expect when they begin school in the fall. I did want to highlight a little bit on the edge. Last summer was a non-starter for us given the COVID challenges that we had, but this summer, working with Bernie closely and her team, we're running at about 60% capacity, which is phenomenal. We're closed on Fridays this year to make sure that our cleaning protocols are good, that we're taking care of business on that end. I think all of our folks need to understand that everything that we do in all of our summer camps, all of our summer classes, whether it's preschool, school age, senior citizens, adult programming, anything, everything is vetted through the protocols that Bernie reviewed earlier. And we have a keen eye on safety and making sure that we can continue to offer the same type of program while still doing it safely. An interesting note is our facilities coordinator was able to exceed budget expectations during the last COVID session with our facilities rentals. Because of the diligence of Bernie and her team and my facilities coordinator in making sure that all of our users were following their safety plans to the letter. So that was really exciting to see. A couple of things. Course enrollment and registration is going up. It's a trend that we've been seeing for the last few months now, and that's very exciting to see. Families are wanting to get out, they're wanting to get involved, and they want more opportunities to participate in public. It's kind of a pleasure. Finally, we had a Eagle Scout do a garden out at Hidden Valley. This is 2 summers ago, and we haven't been able to get access to it. This summer, I worked with Jason and some of his team, and we've got a gardener who's out there going to incorporate that into the summer school curriculum and put that garden to use. And then at the end of the summer program, beginning in the fall, the students at Hidden Valley and at Project Kids can help manage that garden and put it to bed for the winter. So that's pretty exciting, actually. The other piece that I want to highlight is the virtual option for summer school. A lot of families want their kids just to have what they quote a normal summer. That's what the vast majority of my emails were calling it. But there are a number of families that still wanted to have access to these virtual summer school. And I'm excited to say that there's a lot of kids participating in it, and we will see how that runs for them and how they feel about that. And if that's something that we want to continue in the future, we certainly can. But generally speaking, it's been a pretty exciting transition for what we've seen over the last 14 months. And referencing earlier the flexible ARP dollars, we've got a large number of families already applying for those classes, set up a system online for them to register. We've got our social workers, our liaisons working hard on that. Principal and their admin teams are working hard on that. And with our city partners and some community partners, I anticipate having a large number of kids enrolled in programs outside of the school district programming as well. So pretty exciting. That's it for me. Thank you.
And to conclude our report tonight, a few words about graduation. So our last graduation ceremony is at Burnsville High School Pate Stadium tomorrow night. As required, students and staff must still follow Minnesota's Safe Learning Plan. Guests are strongly encouraged to wear a mask as mitigation against the spread of coronavirus. As Bernie said earlier, we want to protect the most vulnerable, and so several guests are opting for the Mirage reserved seating with social distancing and required masks, as well as the mask-only section in Pate Stadium. As of this morning, Principal Helke reported we have 76 individuals who reserved the Mirage for the graduation ceremony and 166 for the mask-only section in the stadium. And that concludes our report for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Battle and all that spoke. Appreciate that. We'll go now to any comments or questions that board members might have. Yes.
Yes, this might be for either Mr. Sellers or Mr. Umhofer. So I'm excited about the virtual academy option for our virtual summer school for our Project Kids students. And I was just wondering if the numbers that were reflected in Mr. Sellers' report included the Project Kids enrollment in the virtual academy, or if that was, if that's separate.
Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you for your question. They do. So the virtual academy includes 2 groups of students. One group of students are the Project Kids students whose families chose that option in addition to Project Kids. That happens during the day. It's 2 hours of literacy and science from 9 to 11 with a half an hour break, and then an hour of math. And that was something that parents asked for, was if we want the academic time. Last summer, it was 2 total hours. This summer, they asked for more time with a smaller break in between. That's what we've afforded them. The second group of students are families who aren't in Project Kids, but wanted the virtual option for their students at home for part of their.
Okay, thank you.
Other board members want a question or comment?
I had a couple.
Yes.
I guess my first question, kind of tying into Leslie's question, is the enrollment numbers seem very high to me. How do they compare to pre-COVID enrollment numbers for summer programming?
Thank you for your question. 2 years ago, when we first implemented this 24-day, all-day program at the elementary and the middle school, and then the 8th grade STEM Academy, which I presented to you all, the numbers were slightly lower than the numbers that we have this summer. And so 2 summers ago, for example, we had 7 kindergarten sections. This summer, we have 9 kindergarten sections. 2 summers ago, we had 4 first grade sections. This summer, we have 7 first grade sections. And so what we have found in general is that parents very much are preferring the in-person mode for summer programming in the area learning center. And we sort of had expected that. We've been planning since December with our operations team, with the CISA department, with our food service teams. We posted positions earlier, we hired earlier, because we wanted to make sure that we had as much capacity as possible. And I will say that thank you to Dave Lake and his team, and Julie Cronenbetter and her team, and Tom and our community education team, because we decided very early on to expand to another elementary site so that we could accommodate not only the influx in numbers, but the social distancing, and then the integration of the pre-K program at Vista View, as well as the integration of the special ed programs in all 3 of our sites.
Great, thank you. And then my other question, and we may not be able to answer it until the end of summer, but I'm curious about, you mentioned, or I think Bernie mentioned that masking is required for elementary and middle if the 6 feet of social distancing cannot be maintained. I think is how it was phrased. Is there an expectation or a thought about how frequently that might happen? Like, is it going to be every day? Is it just going to be like 5 minutes at a time? I'm just curious what that might look like. If it can't
a lot
be
of that is
maintained.
based on how many students are going to be in the classroom area. I do know though for our, and Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, for our 5th graders, they will be at a 6-foot social distancing model. No?
Correct.
Okay, because we have a few more 6th and 7th graders that are signed up. They won't be at a 6-foot hybrid model for distancing, but we are going to try to promote more time. So if a student is being pulled out to a smaller group, making sure that that space is 6 feet for those kids so their mask can come off. Making sure that, we get them outside more so their mask can come off. So being creative and really dissecting the day for the student, and where can we give them more opportunities to take that mask off, and having 6 feet between them, because we know that that's the safe distance, right. But not always something that we can do because of numbers.
And that's required whether or not they've been, go ahead.
Bernie shared, if I may. Early on in working with Bernie and her team, we decided that what we were going to do is we were going to plan as if all of summer programming in our area learning center programs had to be at 6 feet. And so in working with our building partners and Dave Lake and his team, both at Vista View and at Hidden Valley and at Eagle Ridge, we are planning to go in and use the buildings as currently constructed in terms of the social distancing around that 6 feet requirement. Our goal in hearing some of Bernie's presentation this evening around COVID safety precautions this summer is to provide as many opportunities as possible for students to be 6 feet apart so that they can attend class without their mask.
Great, thank you. We've done such a great job with protecting our students and our staff, so I'm really encouraged by this report and by what the summer plans are, that we're continuing to do that during the summer months, so thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, thank you. We'll now move to the superintendent's report. Dr. Battle.
Thank you, Chair Miller and members of the board once again. I will share information about 2 subjects tonight. First, I would like to say a special thank you and congratulations to our retiring employees. We have 34 191 staff members who are retiring or have retired during the 2020-21 school year, with a combined 836 years of service to the district. Whether in the classroom providing support services or as an administrator, their contributions to our students and our community have been invaluable. And so to the retirees, I say thank you for all that you have done, and I wish you a long and enjoyable retirement that you deserve. Next, I want to say how exciting it is to be an educator at this time of year. So the last few weeks of the school year are such an amazing time to recognize the accomplishments of our students, and I think we have done a great job doing that. From our earlier ceremonies with AVID program students and our Indigenous students and families to graduation ceremonies this week for our Best Transition program and tonight at Burnsville Alternative High School, and even today earlier our preschool students here at Diamond Head. It's been an honor and a privilege celebrating our amazing students. And tomorrow, our adult education program will celebrate its students' accomplishments virtually. And as I mentioned, of course, Burnsville High School will hold commencement at Pate Stadium. And I'm so proud of all the graduates, and I know their families, their teachers, and the entire 191 community is proud of them too. I'd like to thank the families for entrusting their students to us for care and education. And that concludes my report for tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. Now I will open up to the board member report section of our evening. Again, this is not committee reports, but regular other assignments and such for board members. Anything to report this evening? Yes.
Thank you, Chair Miller. It's been a pleasure, as Dr. Battle alluded to finally being able to get out in our schools and celebrate our students in year-end events. I enjoyed witnessing our AVID senior celebration and was particularly moved by our students' stories and words of encouragement for each other. Similarly, at the Nicollet 8th grade AVID graduation, the caring support of staff was self-evident in their smiles and stories from the past 3 years. 2 AVID seniors set the stage for success for this group of incoming 9th graders by sharing their own words of wisdom and encouragement. Last Friday evening, it was an honor to attend our district's first Indigenous graduation ceremony. The heat of the evening was accompanied by tribal elders honoring our Indigenous graduates, tribal history and traditions, and the beautiful drum song, which is so central in tribal events. Graduates received their eagle feathers, recognizing their hard work while simultaneously bestowing respect and honor to our students for their efforts. Tuesday night, I had the pleasure of attending the Best graduation ceremony at the high school with great representation from fellow board members. And it was the first time that the Best graduation was held at the high school, and it was just wonderful. It was a pleasure to hear the graduates' personal accounts of their hands-on learning and work experience they enjoyed while in the Best program. And it's always a joy to hear about our graduates' plans for the future and careers. So much to be proud of. My heartfelt congratulations, to echo Dr. Battle's comments, to all of our students for persevering through this unusual and challenging year. It feels good to be back and celebrating the accomplishments of all of our students. Finally. That ends my report.
Any other board members? Okay, seeing none. That will conclude the information component of our meeting tonight, and we'll move into the business meeting, beginning with our consent agenda. Although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. In the event a board member wishes to discuss an item, that item will be moved for separate consideration. I'll ask at this time if there's any item on the consent agenda that board member would wish to move out for separate consideration. All right, seeing none. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll on, I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, you're right. Take a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Director Alt,
Second.
seconded by Director Said. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Aye.
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 Very good. The motion on the consent agenda passes unanimously. We will move to new business. First being, this first item for new business is long-term facility maintenance for ISD 917. Speaking on this topic will be Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services. Ms. Ryder.
Thank you. This evening, we will be talking about these first two topics here are around long-term facility maintenance revenue. And so we're going to begin with 917 as they are the intermediate that we are a member of. So statute allows for them to levy through us for their needs related to long-term facility maintenance. They may only utilize these funds on buildings that they own. So as you can see from the resolution and the materials attached, there is an application process with the state of Minnesota that requires us to lay out the expenditures on a 10-year planning model as to what we would anticipate spending in those 10 years. With 917 for the year of fiscal year 23, they have laid out the amount of $127,865, and our proportionate share of that amount is $19,473.84. So the resolution before you is referring to the approval of our school board for the levying of our taxpayers for our proportionate share of their request, their full amount of request. So the proportionate share for us is only that $19,474. So how this works is our board approves this for 917. Every other member of 917 school board approves their proportionate share. And then 917 will submit their application and it becomes part of the levy process that you will then hear me discuss with you in September and December. So with that, I would then read the recommendation. Let me get to that. So the resolution is approving the Intermediate School District 917's long-term facility maintenance program budget and authorizing the inclusion of a proportionate share of those projects in the district's application for long-term facility maintenance revenue.
Thank you. I will take a motion for the recommendation in front of us.
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume,
Second.
seconded by Director Werb. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Connor,
Ms. Connor is not present.
Chester.
Aye.
The motion passes. We will then move to the next item being long-term facility maintenance for ISD 191. This will be, again, Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services. Ms. Ryder.
Thank you. So just a little bit more information is provided in your packet with regard to the history of long-term facility maintenance in the state of Minnesota. So that is available for anyone who's interested in understanding that better. As I mentioned just a moment ago with the 917 proposal, similarly, we need to put together a 10-year plan. So our Director of Operations and Transportation, Dave Lake, who's also present on this evening's meeting, he put together a review of all the 10 years, and with that, you have attached to your agenda a list of the various different projects identified by site for each of the next 10 years. We are focusing on the amount that is referenced for the fiscal year 23 budget, and that will be a part of our Pay 2022 levy. So as you can see with the materials, there's two different ways that the state wants to see this. They want to know, the state wants to know it by what type of work is it. So that's why you see with the breakdown of the expenditures, it's done by like what's electrical work, what is exterior work, that kind of category. The way our Director Lake has proposed it also for you is by project, by site. So that gives you the sense of exactly what are we doing, where is it being done at each of the different locations. We have listed all 10 years in the PDF that is attached to the board materials, and so that's available to you. The recommendation that is before you is that the Board of Education adopts the resolution approving the revised long-term facilities maintenance program budget for fiscal year 2023. Ours is in the amount of, let's see, $2,532,948 is the total, of which $399,876 is for health and safety needs, and the other $2,133,072 are for the alternative facility projects identified for the fiscal year 23. Our actual application will include the 917 portion, which is above and beyond the numbers I just stated. So with that, I recommend that the board approve or adopt the resolution approving the revised long-term facilities maintenance program budget for fiscal year 23.
Thank you. I'll take a motion for the recommendation in front of us.
So moved.
Moved by Director Chester,
Second.
seconded by Director Said, was it?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Mouths don't move with masks, it's hard to see. All right, so now I'll open it up for discussion. Anybody want to speak on the matter? Yes, Director Ross.
I have a question, not necessarily about the application for this year, but looking ahead, and in the interest of, I guess, just looking ahead and knowing that this is part of the plan that we're being asked to approve. Looking at the Diamond Head renovations that are proposed in FY24, these areas, the carpeting and the painting, those exclude all areas that were previously renovated using Vision 191 bond, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So the areas that are actually being renovated would be,
So for painting in particular, what we do is we do an assessment. We bring a contractor out when we get our bids, and we look the building over to determine what the areas of greatest need are. So that's how we do the painting projects. We take the dollar amount given, and then we do utilize that fund as much as possible. As far as the carpeting, it's more the main open areas that we're talking about, the hallways. Like you had stated earlier, Vision 191 we did spend a lot of money in the area of painting and carpet and a whole host of things. But yeah, we wouldn't redo things that we just did a couple of years back.
okay, awesome. And then another, I guess the question is, looking at the project long-term, and I understand that these are just placeholders, right? And things move around from year to year depending on what the need is. In the last couple of years, I know we've had schools that have had carpeting and doors replaced going back to 1996. And I guess, Dr. Battle, recognizing that, you're talking about doing a full overview of both the financial, the financial picture and the facilities picture. Will this plan also be encapsulated in that in terms of how we prioritize our facilities investments?
Thank you for the question, Director Alt and members of the board. So for the review of our expenditures, it is best practice to look at final budgets. So we're only going to look at 2 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa Ryder, is 2018-19 and 2019-20 to look at general fund expenditures within operations and maintenance.
For the general fund expenditure review, that would be the case. If we're talking about a long-range facility plan, LTFM will be a portion of that plan as one may be developed.
And I guess the point that I want to make, understanding, of course, that this will come back to us again next year. We're a district of dwindling resources and dwindling enrollment. And we have schools, as I said, that have waited for renovations going back to 1996. This building was acquired in 1997. We have similar upgrades that need to happen across the district in our schools. Some of them are already outlined in the LTFM plan down the road. And I guess I would just caution staff to be thoughtful about the message that we're sending to our taxpayers and to the families that we wish to attract and retain when we're putting forth a significant investment in basically district staff space, because we know that our learning space has already been addressed by Vision 191 bond. I, for one, would be very supportive of investing in our learning spaces over our staff spaces. And I need to speak up for our taxpayers and keeping our eye on the fact that we do want to attract and retain families, and having clean, welcoming, up-to-date schools is part and parcel of that.
I would wholeheartely agree with you on that. For instance, when we talk about FY24 for Diamond Head, you'll notice there's a $1.2 million re-roofing project. The original roof is 1998 for Diamond Head, and we've been pushing that back for 4 years. 1.2 million is a huge amount of money, and I'm hopeful we can continue to push that back and then use that 1.2, just as you said, in the schools where we need it most. So that at the moment, that's a placeholder there. But as far as some of the other projects at Diamond Head, where you see system, EFS, and exterior painting, those are classroom areas. Those are where students are, where we have water intrusions coming through windows and things like that. So that is going straight to our students and not for staff, as you alluded. So I wholeheartedly agree with your point.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, of course, if we have to replace a roof, we need to replace a roof. There's, I know that I've seen that being pushed back, probably now 2 or 3 years. It's the cosmetic investments in a space like Diamond Head that already is a beautiful building, that I would prefer to see that going towards, our students' learning spaces. And thank you for letting me know that some of what's already in that FY24 budget is actually for learning spaces, because that's really where we need to focus ourselves in the near term.
And just to add, Director Alt, thank you about the learning spaces. So at Diamond Head, we have our youngest learners, preschool here, as well as our adult basic education learners too. And as you know, we'll be moving more learners here with the BEST program. And so to keep an eye on that as well.
Well, just point of clarification, our early childhood ABE and BEST already have those renovations covered. Those were, the first 2 were covered by Vision 191. It's a beautiful learning space. BEST, we've already talked about being covered by capital funds, so I'm putting that in a different bucket.
Yes. And I think I was referring to the common spaces. So today we had the preschool recognition in the common space, which isn't, so Dave can correct me, that wasn't part of Vision 191. That's the plan, the kind of carpeting. So just wanted to make that note too, but thank you. Our schools are the core of our building, and yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, seeing none, Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion in front of us passes unanimously. We will now move to next item, to approve Normandale Community College contract. Again, Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services.
Thank you. This is a typical contract that comes to us once a year, as this is an annual agreement now that we have. This is with Normandale Community College for post-secondary enrollment option services for the 21-22 school year. This agreement is one that we also do with Inver Hills, but it is not coming forward to you at this time, as they will present their contract to us in August. But Normandale has requested, that we do, we sign that agreement through DocuSign. So tonight, I'm asking that the Board of Education approve the income contract with the state of Minnesota, acting through its Board of Trustees of the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities on behalf of Normandale Community College for PSEO for the 2021-2022 school year, and authorize the Executive Director of Business Services to execute that agreement.
All right, may I have a motion, please, for the recommendation in front of us?
So moved.
Moved by Director Chester,
Second.
seconded by Director Connor. I'll open up for any questions or comments. Okay, seeing none, Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Aye.
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 The motion passes unanimously. Next, we have, subject is to approve City of Burnsville Ice Arena lease, again with Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services.
Thank you. It is that time of year. It's a little sooner than it has been in years past, but I think that's really simply just for the process at the city level. They have requested that we bring this forward to you for approval here in June. And this agreement is very similar in verbiage to that which has been approved this past school year. So there is some COVID language that you see reflected in here and continuing forward. We do know that the schedule that is attached is a schedule based upon the anticipated hours and days that we would utilize the ice arena. However, it has been noted that should, for example, we don't move into the finals and we do not need the ice rental as long in the season as what this agreement may call for, that then is basically a defined end time to our season by the Minnesota State High School League, and that then falls under that contract language, allowing us to remove those dates and not pay for them. And so given the way the language reads, I just want to point that out because it doesn't hold us to all 463.25 hours of ice time that is recommended or reserved here, should we not use them at the end of the season, for example. So the information that you see within this agreement does call for 463.25 hours of ice time. The total estimated amount, should we use all of those hours, would be $110,336.25. The rate per hour has been increased to $10, so it's now $240 per hour. The hourly rate was last increased for the fiscal year 2020 contract. With that, the recommendation is that the Board of Education approves the Burnsville Ice Center rental agreement for the 2021-2022 school year in the estimated amount of $110,336.25 for the total of 463.25 hours of ice time.
I will take a motion for the recommendation in front of us.
So moved.
Moved by Director Hume,
Second.
seconded by Director Werb. Questions or comments?
Is this for the community or just the students?
This is for the use by the high school varsity and junior varsity teams.
Only?
Boys and girls, I should say.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Ms. Kenny, please call the roll.
Aye.
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 And the motion passes unanimously. Last item in our new business, to approve CSTMN amendment to the agreement due to COVID-19. Ms. Ryder, Director Ryder, you're up again.
Yes, you may recall that back in the winter months, we had a similar type addendum that was approved for Schmidt and Sons Transportation. Given the fact that we approved that addendum to the Schmidt and Sons agreement, the Collaborative Student Transportation of Minnesota, or CSTMN, has requested a similar type addendum to their agreement, which would allow for essentially similar expenditures to be made for services of the same students that are otherwise being served on the school days that we did serve students. For those non-school days that we had, that they would receive 90% of funding for those similar routes. This is identical language to the extent that it applied. So like, for instance, there was a paragraph 5 on the Schmidt and Sons agreement that referred to field trips and such. That isn't how we utilize CSTMN. We utilize them largely for special education transportation and homeless transportation that cannot be managed by Schmidt and Sons. So therefore, much of the expenditure that we would incur in approving this addendum and paying for that 90% for those non-student days, that amount of money would be funded by our special education reimbursement as well as the homeless reimbursement for transportation. These amounts also then do, for the special ed purposes, count towards our maintenance of effort of special education expenditures. So as you recall, we're receiving similar special education funding for the expenditures that we've incurred, regardless of whether or not the staff were necessarily serving students throughout all of the days in person. So the fact of the matter is the funding is available to us. It's a matter of being able to maintain that relationship with CSTMN, and they're just asking simply for the same addendum similar to what Schmidt and Sons had approved with us. This addendum does only go through January 31st, as that was the case for the Schmidt and Sons agreement as well. So with that, the recommendation is that the Board of Education approves the addendum to the Pupil Transportation Services Agreement with CSTMN for the months of September 2020 through January of 2021.
Okay, thank you. I will take a motion for the recommendation.
So moved.
Moved by Director Chester,
Second.
seconded by Director Hume. Any questions or comments? Yes, Director Alt.
Just one comment, recognizing, of course, that these are two different companies that we're dealing with. I guess I'm just surprised at the delay with this and the timing that this is coming to us. Is there any additional information that could shed light on that? It seems a little late.
Yeah, it is a little late. They came to us previously with this request, and I pushed back initially, asking for them to provide context to exactly how we would calculate this for them. And so we did quite a bit of information back and forth between, and most recently they have provided us a list of individuals they are serving by student name, and our special ed department has gone through that to confirm the fact that they were our students during this period of time, that they did serve them. And so there's quite a bit more legwork that's been done to kind of fine tune how this would be exactly functioning for their purposes and for ours, to make sure that we had a clear understanding. So it's due to that time frame of what it took to get that work done that there's been a delay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Aye.
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 Excellent. The motion passes unanimously. That concludes our agenda for new business tonight and our regular scheduled board meeting. We will now be moving to a, are we adjourning or are we moving to? Okay. We're moving to a regular, or to a scheduled student performance and achievement committee meeting, SPA committee meeting. Before doing so, we'll take a brief break. The time I have is currently 8:25. Let's gather back here at 8:40. Thank you. I wasn't sure. Okay, we will return from our break. We will now be heading to a workshop of the board, a Student Performance and Achievement Committee, to discuss grade 3 report with World's Best Workforce Goal. Speaking will be Amina Oftabo, Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment. Also joining her, Bethany Van Osdale, CISA Coordinator, and Anna Riselli, Assessment Coordinator. Amina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair Miller, Superintendent Battle, and members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to share the accomplishments and growth of our students in this very, very unique school year. Joining me this evening are Bethany Van Osdale, CISA Elementary Curriculum Coordinator, and Anna Riselli, CISA Data and Research Coordinator. This evening, we will share the goals for the World's Best Workforce and the Read Well by Grade 3 plan. We will provide a brief overview of the core of the K-5 literacy instructional program. We'll examine the available K-3 literacy achievement spring data. Ms. Riselli will address assessment adaptations for this particular pandemic year. And Ms. Van Osdale will then discuss the instructional response to our winter data and share a look at the literacy work aligned with the COVID rebound and recovery. First, the district goal for the World's Best Workforce area stating all third graders can read at grade level. The 2019-20 goal was intended to be measured with the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment. However, the MCAs were not administered in the spring of 2020. And then this year's goal was measured by the A reading since in the fall, it wasn't known if the MCAs would be administered. When we did move into the MCA administration, there were many students participating in Virtual Academy. Almost 30% of our students, or 35% of our students selected Virtual Academy. Many of those in the Virtual Academy chose not to take the test since they were required to be administered in person. So also lacking the A reading data from last spring, we decided to set our goal on a fall to spring improvement. The goal was set at 50% for this spring's results. And the final result this spring was 44% of all grade 3 students were demonstrating grade level reading comprehension. Later in the presentation, Ms. Riselli will share some specifics about the assessment and give you a closer look at how the data demonstrates the resilience and growth of our students and the impact that the teachers have had to make gains over the course during this pandemic school year. I will hand this over to Ms. Van Osdale to speak about our literacy program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's always an honor to speak about our K-5 literacy program. We wanted to give you an overview of what our core program looks like. And so what we have is we have the 5 pillars of reading. Across this continuum here, we have the levels that kids advance through in order to learn to read. So we start with phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency. Those are considered our early literacy skills. And in our district, we have a program called Being a Reader. If you might click to advance the slide, that will pop up. Thank you. In K2, we have a program called Being a Reader. And this is where these skills are directly instructed and also assessed. And that would be everything from letter names to handwriting, shared reading. This is where our small group instruction comes in. If you think of guided reading groups, this is where our word study comes in. So this is really the program that we have in our primary grades that directly teaches these foundational skills. If you could click ahead for me, thank you. Then we look at our vocabulary and comprehension. These are our higher level skills. So everything we do, we say we always do in service of comprehension. At the end of the day, we want our kids really understanding what they're reading. And so we have K-5 making meaning, and that, so you'll notice K2, right, being a reader, and then K-5. So K2 also has making meaning. And this is where kids engage in whole group activities such as interactive read alouds. That's where the teacher reads aloud text and students are turning and talking or putting heads together or having a little collaborative groups around making meaning, basically, right, in service of that comprehension. This is where they also learn their vocabulary. And the other layer to this is their independent reading. So this is where teachers are meeting one-on-one, conferring with kids to really determine, assess, and instruct one-on-one to make sure that the kids are really getting to that place of understanding what they're reading. You can go ahead and advance the slide. These are some photos of our kids who are engaging. On the left-hand side, we have kids in their small group reading. They're actually doing their independent reading at this time. And then I'm going to pop you all the way over to the right. The teacher here on the right is doing her conferring. So while kids are doing independent reading, the teacher then is able to pull them one-on-one to have those conferences and have that very personalized instruction time. And then in the middle, we've got some, I think honestly this is first grade, and they're doing a little bit of shared reading around the room. So this is where they are practicing text that's familiar to them so they can build accuracy and fluency. So these are the core programs. Go ahead and advance the slides. Now, our hope is that all of our students' needs will be met in this core program. And what we know is that's not always the case. So we consider tier 1 to be this core instruction. So the red piece here, we're looking at hopefully meeting 80% of our students' needs. And again, we saw that that's not always where that happens. So now we're looking at how do we support the kids who aren't quite getting it in tier 1. We layer on tier 2 and tier 3. And what this looks like in our programming in Burnsville, if you go ahead and advance, you'll see we have, you've heard this before, our what I need time. And that's, you'll hear it called win time. And this happens in every school, K-5, and it's 30 minutes daily. And this is where targeted instruction happens. So once we identify what kids' individual needs are, we group them in specific groups in order to target either enrichment, in some cases intervention, which is what we're talking about here with tier 2 and tier 3. Data from our FAST data is used, which you'll hear Anna talk about in a minute. We use these to drive our decisions to make sure kids are in flexible groups. And then we monitor their progress to make sure that they are making gains towards being able to just have their needs met then in that tier 1. And that, I think I will pass to Anna.
Sorry, lost my mouse. We have seen this graph or this diagram before about assessment in the time of COVID. Not only are we asking students to learn differently, but we're asking them to assess differently. So these different bubbles really focus in on what some of those transitions or adjustments had to be and what a big shift that was in order to get useful and meaningful data for instructional purposes. So learning trajectories, we know were going to be different during COVID because of the dependency on different types of technology, internet service, online resources. All of these things had to be given to students in a hurry in the spring, and in the fall. Again, there was sort of a relearning of how we were going to set up school. There was a lot of volatility for families in general. The existing barriers around nutrition, transportation, stability at home were exacerbated by the COVID crisis. Remote testing then became a very new modality. One of the things that we've learned based on some NWEA map, which a lot of different assessment sources, look to the different companies about what they find based on their studies, is that remote testing really didn't change. There wasn't the issue with reliability and validity that they found, except in very young kids, which is something to keep in mind as we look at our kinders in our first grade. That type of remote testing, because it's done one-on-one, tended to have a lot more variability in its reliability and validity. And then the volatility of school, the transitions that we had amongst the learning models, transitions between teachers, how to actually do school in the classroom. A lot of our curriculum and Bethany can speak to this, is not set up for distance, for mouths being covered by masks. All these different things created, again, the volatility that we found in school. Despite that, our teachers, I felt, really just dug in and did what they needed to do. I know that there are many districts in the Twin Cities area that did not do the type of assessment that we did. So we were able to do a lot of instruction based on assessments that we were able to acquire during the COVID months. Next slide. So the assessment that we use and that we'll be reporting on today is the FastBridge. There's a suite, 3 assessments. Early reading teaches those pre-reading, early reading skills, letter naming, letter sounds. There's a composite score from 6 or 7 different assessments that are very short. The curriculum-based measurement, CBM, is fluency, which is the foundation for creating automaticity and we know assistant comprehension. And then there's the A reading assessment that measures comprehension and vocabulary. These benchmarks for these assessments change from fall to winter to spring. So the goal is to continue the progression to meet the benchmark to show that kids are on track for learning to read at their grade level. Next slide. So we will be reporting out on proficiency. So again, we know that from fall to spring, those goals change for students. And we want students to improve in their goals as well as gain the number of students for that proficiency. So our early reading overall, and these will be a collection of both kindergarten and first grade, we maintained at 37%. CBM fluency, and that is done for grades 1 through 3, so first, second, and third grade. We did see a drop in the spring. And A reading grades 1 through 3, we were to maintain at 41%. One thing to keep in mind too is that we're not measuring student to student on this. It is the number of students that were tested during that time. Next slide. In looking at the grades separately, kindergarten only does early reading. And so we did see a drop of 3% from 40% to 37%. For the spring. Grade 1, it uses all 3 assessments. So their early reading and their CBM fluency and A reading did increase by anywhere from 2 to 7%, excuse me. Next slide. Grade 2, we saw CBM fluency and A reading. These are the assessments that grade 2 uses. We saw a slight drop in CBM fluency and we saw a slight rise in A reading. And the same thing for grade 3. CBM went down from 43 to 39%, but A reading went up from 43 to 45%. If we're going to disaggregate the data, we're looking at demographics. So if you see on the left side, we are split up by federal ethnicity. I just wanted to note that the American Indian population for grades K through 3 is very small. I believe it is under 20 students. So you're going to see a lot more volatile changes in that percentage, largely because even if it's 3 or 4 students, you're going to see a huge percentage shift in that. So our Asian students dropped slightly. Black and African American students were able to maintain. Latino. And keep in mind that the Latino population that we have is also a high L and a high free reduced lungs population. They went from 23 to 21%. 2 or more identified race dropped slightly, and white students increased from 47 to 53%. We have on the right the A reading proficiency of our special groups. And so what we have is where the special education students started in the fall and where they ended in the spring. The graph next to it is based on the general education, so students who are not special education. English learner status went from 17% to 14%, and we compare that with our non-English learner status, so that would be native speakers, from 53 to 52%. So one of the things that I think about as as the data coordinator is, what does this mean regarding shifts? One of the things that I think is important is when you look at proficiency, you're only looking at how the group either rose or dropped. But I think one of the important things that we think about as instructional leaders is, are different pieces of instruction and curriculum, are they working? So curriculum for tier 1, we want to make sure that students are maintaining proficiency. But when we think about interventions, but those are our tier 2, we want to know if our students who are not proficient are gaining proficiency. And one way to do this is from looking at this proficiency shift graph. So if you look at these different boxes, the yellow boxes show where a student started and ended. The row at the top is, are we exceeding expectations? Are we low risk for FastBridge, meaning we're above the 50 percentile benchmark that we look at, and we do some risk or high risk for students who are below that. So if we look at the boxes on the right, those that are green mean that students may have started not proficient, but they gained proficiency over the winter of 20 to the spring of 21. So I took the pre-pandemic basically risk factors or risk categories of those students and compared to where they ended up. The students that would be in the lower left-hand corner would be students who were proficient and then no longer are proficient. So did we see a huge drop? And again, the narrative that was around COVID was that we were going to see all this learning loss and all these students were going to be losing ground and they wouldn't be able to maintain where they are. So if you take a look at some of the numbers then that I provided, ooh, it's so magical, Amina. So there are 913 students where we have a winter 2020 score right before COVID hit, and a spring 2021 score for A reading. And the students that were able to either stay in the upper proficiency boxes, so these are the ones that you see bolded in black, or rose from the lower right-hand corner to the upper right-hand corner was 40.9%. Now that means that we have 60% that weren't there, but it meant that they stayed not proficient, which again, given where we were in COVID, some of them weren't receiving the resources that they were. But a little bit more data that I looked at a little bit later is we lost 72 students from the upper left-hand corner down, right? Those students moved lower below the black line. But if you go to the lower right-hand corner, the students that moved up were actually 91. So when we think of our net gain, we're actually gaining students during COVID, which I think actually is a pretty amazing thing. So in looking at these boxes, we ask ourselves on the left-hand side, how is our tier 1 instruction going? Are we maintaining proficiency? And when we look at the right-hand side, we ask ourselves, how is our tier 2, how is our intervention working? And given that we still had 40.9% students either maintaining or rising from due to intervention, again, I think speaks to the resilience that our students have.
So we had the pleasure of meeting with you a few months ago to talk about how our world changed in education, right? I think we all remember where we were when we started getting the emails that schools were going to be closing last March. And for our teachers, they immediately had to flip everything that they were doing. And so we wanted to just take a pause and just kind of refresh exactly how that looked for our elementary folks, especially K-3. None of our curriculum is designed to be taught via virtually, right? And so overnight, our teachers had to start building that. And we spoke to, if you go back just 1 second, Amina, we spoke to how there was never a question around these values. There was never if we continue to lean into standards, or we continue to seek to engage each student, or we continue to build relationships, we continue to be guided by data, or insist on being student-centered. It was always a question of how. And so when we look at literacy, now go ahead, Mina, thank you. Now when we look at literacy and what we had to do, well, yes, we were back in person for the recent months. A large majority of the year, students were flipping back and forth between virtual and in person. And so if you go ahead and click, Amina, we had to figure out how to teach exactly what I shared with you a few slides ago, how to teach synchronous lessons around making meaning, and that's building comprehension for students and teaching vocabulary, how to do our interventions. And teachers did these things still virtually. They modified them, they created very innovative ways to still teach these standards-based direct instruction. Go ahead, Amina. They figured out ways to teach that small group reading, right? And I think that shows, I think to Anna's point, we didn't see a large drop, and we were able to, for the most part, maintain. One thing that stuck out to me as I've worked with this literacy program and our teachers for a very long time now is fluency tends to be something that we do struggle with, even pre-COVID. So those were some of the areas that you saw go down in K1, 1, 2, 3. And so that's something that we have always worked to kind of intervene on fluency. Go ahead, Amina. And then finally, again, that independent reading time. And this is where that fluency really comes into play, is when kids are reading, they say, put miles on their tongues, right? As much as they can read. And so with our kids virtually, that was hard sometimes for teachers to know if and when they were doing that independent reading. Go ahead, Amina. So all of that being said, we look ahead and we take what we know is that we not only survived, right, but we were able to thrive with some students, and our teachers, I would say, need to be commended for everything that they were able to do to keep kids from falling far behind. And yet, I say that knowing we've got a lot of work to do, and our teachers and principals know that and are committed. So here are some things that we're looking ahead to as we address this data. So we are, Jason shared with you earlier, going to have continued phonics instruction for K1 in summer school, and that will be done through the Being a Reader program. And so we'll be able to continue that aligned systematic phonics instruction for our K1 students there. We will be looking at literacy coaching in our CT meetings, our collaborative team meetings. This is where our grade levels meet, and they will be meeting monthly with our trainers from our literacy program to really look at getting back to basics in our implementation. So we know that we have a very strong, very effective program when implemented with fidelity. And we also know that we have absolutely had to adjust and tweak and modify things because of our current reality. And so now we want to get back to basics. So through those collaborative team meetings, they will be looking at formative assessments and really looking to see if what they're teaching is landing. So are the students learning what they need to be learning? The third bullet down is talking again about fidelity, and that's learning walks. And that's going to be with our BLTs and our principals. And that's where we walk through classrooms and we just look to see, are we doing what we say we're doing, right? Are we really implementing this in the way that we should be implementing it to see accelerated progress? The next one is Fast for Success. So we've got our assessments that Anna just spoke to. We've got some sites that are going to be going deeper and doing a lot of professional development and team time and collaboration around how to use that, again, to ensure success. We also have a kindergarten phonics pilot. So knowing that early intervention, right, is really what we want to try to build into our kindergarten team. Harriet Bishop is going to pilot a phonics program so that we can hopefully find another tool to keep in our toolbox, right, for that phonics instruction. Additional tutor support, I believe after school, Amina, you might want to speak a little bit more to that, and then training to support our English learners for all teachers, and that's through some really dedicated and aligned and collaborative PSYOP training and co-teaching training. So again, all of these things really getting back to what we know works and making sure that we are always monitoring and ensuring that accelerated progress.
Thank you. And so I think the key takeaways from looking at the data is, first of all, that our students did not experience what the headlines are screaming about learning loss. We were anticipating this learning loss. We were looking at it, but when you see the scores of, 40% to 40% or 40 to 41%, you're looking at students who are growing a full year's growth. That means because the benchmarks shift and grow at each point, so what's proficient for a third grader in the fall increases to what's proficient for a third grader in the winter, and that increases to what is proficient for a third grader in the spring. And so those targets continue to increase. So a student who is proficient in the spring or in the fall and continues to be proficient in the spring has maintained their level of more than maintained it, they have demonstrated a year's worth of typical growth. So they didn't fall behind, they continued to grow. We still see areas where we want more accelerated growth, more than 1 year's worth of growth within the year, but we are looking at students who have had their learning model shifted. We are looking at students who had their teachers shifted. We are looking at students who were experiencing external factors, all of those things, and still their teachers stepped up to the plate and were able to deliver instruction and personalization so our students could make that year's worth of growth. And so it is the people of District 191, the staff, who really stepped forward and said, we can make this work, we can create learning environments for our students. Looking forward, we know we have, the recovery and rebound that needs to happen. We need to recalibrate our expectations for fidelity of instruction. We need to increase our intervention for students, and we need to continue to hone our own skills and improve our abilities to deliver that instruction. And so with the leadership of Anna and Bethany, I think we've really laid out a powerful 2-year rebound and recovery plan. And this slide just demonstrates a few of those things in partnership with Targeted Services and Jason Sellers, in partnership with Maria Arago, our multilingual coordinator, and in partnership with our principals, and in partnership with the Fast Bridge vendor, to increase the amount of professional development that we can use to really define how we respond to students. So with that, I want to just say thank you and welcome your questions.
Thank you, Amina, and everybody that spoke. I will open it up to the floor. It's we are in a SPA committee meeting, so encourage your thoughts and questions. Yes.
So I think I had heard that when we were looking at the graphs that I heard like it's not a student-to-student comparison. So these are kind of like point in time scores or rankings. So the same number of students in the fall that tested aren't necessarily the same number of students in the spring. So like it's not a direct student-to-student comparison to see if their reading shifted. It's more like of who was there to test that day. And
Right.
Do we know if the numbers of students who tested in the fall were greater or lesser than the numbers of the students that tested in the spring?
So you're correct, with one exception. When Anna took you through the shaded boxes, she's talking about a student-to-student comparison.
Okay.
She's talking about students and where they shifted from winter to spring, and those are actual student-to-student comparisons. The proficiency scores that we shared in the other graphs are all based on students who are here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that presentation. It was very informative. I guess I'm questioning how, was there any method to identify current students that would benefit from our summer programs that kind of fell behind during this time?
Yes, and so that is part of the partnership with Jason Sellers and his program, is that we work with the teachers in the buildings to really set a mark that says these are students who will really benefit from summer instruction, and we make specific referrals. And so those students are invited, and their parents are contacted in order to know that we have a space for them. And then he makes all the spaces available later on.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Additional questions?
Is there a separate data for, as far as the Fast Bridge, for English learners?
All of our English learners do participate in the FastBridge assessments. Any other assessments in terms of language proficiency is done through the EL program, and we get the primary data from our Access, which will become available later this summer.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. I guess, okay. Oh, wait. Thanks. Is that better? Okay. I hear a cat. Sorry, Amina. I really appreciated the conversation around WIN time, and it just reminded me when we piloted WIN, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 years ago, and just to hear that it's now in all of our elementary schools, it really seemed like a powerful program at the time, and knowing that all of our elementary students now have access to that, it just, I think it, and the description that you and Bethany provided really makes me feel reassured about how we're using that time. The other thing, and I had, Leslie, the same question about the students tested versus the cohort. I tend to appreciate the cohort information more because it's kind of an apples to apples comparison, as opposed to just this is the results of this test and this time test, and this is the result of that. But this is where we are, so it's the best we can do. With the training for the professional development for all teachers to be able to support EL, how much time do you think that will take to really be felt in all of our classrooms?
It's professional development that will be spread out and ongoing over the course of this year. So we may see some immediate strategies being implemented. We are beginning an intensive cohort for up to 30 teachers in August who will go through an extended EL PSYOP training. We also have classroom teachers and EL teachers in the secondary who are attending summer training and combining that with AVID strategies. And so we should see some of that implementation right away in our middle and high schools, as well as in co-teaching classrooms. And then all teachers will have the experience with multiple sessions of strategies to support their students throughout the school year. And so the third one probably will be completed sometime in January.
So you kind of answered my follow-up question. This is not just elementary that we're talking about.
No.
So in the same way that, I guess a few years ago, there were conversations around each teacher needing to recognize that they're a reading teacher, regardless of their area of expertise. Now we're setting expectations that each teacher needs to see themselves as an EL supporter as well.
To support language acquisition. We also have, as part of our CPSS training for this year, or for next year, will be a focus on equitable instruction. And part of that is, what are we doing in our classrooms to support our English learners? And that's one of the key benchmarks for a culturally responsive classroom, is recognizing the languages that are in the classroom and making sure that your content is accessible.
Awesome.
So we have that, we're combining those efforts coming from different directions.
That's great. I really appreciate hearing that. And it sounds like, you know, once we get back to more normal school, accelerated growth really is going to be the name of the game where we can get it. Okay. Thank you.
No more. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time this evening. Appreciate putting the work in to get this presentation ready. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, we are going to adjourn to a workshop now. We're going to be discussing a few items around goals and priorities. So, the first item tonight is to discuss at least the initial list of proposed board priorities. Is Stacy still joining us, or did he pop out? Okay.
I think he is.
Stacy, are you still present?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. So I'm going to need to lean on you a little bit on this. So can you give us an overview of the term board priorities, especially since we have some relatively new members present? First, we'll start with that.
About 4 years ago, 2 contracts ago with the teachers, we negotiated some language as we were addressing unrequested leaves of absences or furloughs with teachers, a way in which the board could protect certain programs where different certifications or other types of training was required to protect those programs, pathway programs, college and school programs, a number of different areas where additional training or certifications were required, that seniority in and of itself wouldn't destroy the programs if we had to do layoffs. So we came up with the ability to do board priorities. We do those every August so that everybody knows going into the school year what positions, what priorities the board has. That way it doesn't feel like in the spring somehow there's shenanigans or cherry picking as to who's staying, who's going. Everybody knows on the front end and can plan accordingly.
Thank you. So in practical application, for instance, you know, if seniority rules and such required the layoff, we wouldn't necessarily want to lay off the one master automotive technician we have, or the culinary program, because that role is much harder to fill than another maybe. So then, Stacy, I'll ask, what is, unless it's like a massive list, what is our current list of board priorities? Do you have that available, or?
I do. There's 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different items to kind of read through. Is that?
No, maybe just an overview. Can you manage that?
A lot of it is, again, it's around different pathway programs, our culinary pathway, engineering pathway, healthcare pathway, concurrent enrollment type programs, CTE programs, education pathways, AP, college and schools type of pathways and courses, welding, and auto body, intro to consumer art, automotive pathways, construction pathways, and then dean's positions that are fall under TOSAs.
Okay. So this, we're having this conversation tonight because it's on the board planning document for this period of time. as Stacy intimated, it's a little bit early in that he needs to make decisions in August, but we don't meet in July. So I anticipate this, unless I'm wrong, this is going to be a fairly rapid conversation tonight. But really what I wanted to do is just get everybody familiar with the concept. Stacy, I'd pose the last question to you at this point, is if there's anything we need to know about that might be out of what historically we've done to date. Anything you're anticipating that would be something we should be discussing as a board priority that we isn't on the list currently?
At this time, I'm not, I don't have any other recommendations to bring. Again, we are continually looking at a number of different things, whether we need to protect them, can we protect them? If we do want to protect them, how can we go about doing it in a way that is objective? Certifications, licensures, etc. At this time, I don't have anything that we're going to add, but we got 2 months till August as well.
Okay, and I would open it up to the floor if there's anybody that wants to comment or have any input on this topic this time.
The list that Stacy, you mentioned, is that something that was available prior to the new board members joining? Is that something that's available on board book?
Where it resides, Stacy certainly could provide it. Where it resides, I'm not sure.
The August meeting from last year.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, is
Yeah,
that
it would be.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we will take action in August again, and
Yeah,
Stacy will
just for
bring forward that
reference-wise for the
recommendation.
rest
Yep.
of them.
Yes.
So is there like some sort of criteria that we're using in order to make these priorities? Like, we were giving an example of a particular automotive teacher and we only have that one person. I mean, have we outlined like, well, we need to look at this, 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 and this when we're making those priorities? Or, I mean, how is it done? Is it just, we think we should do this because, or?
Well, again, it's mostly based on Stacy's input and Principal Helke's input on the availability of instruction at that level. And so what would be the impact if we lost an instructor at that level to the program? That I think is the primary and majority of the input that we get on it. And then we have the list that comes forward.
Is it only teachers? Does it include other staff like liaisons or anything like that?
Liaisons.
No, this is an agreement with a teachers bargaining unit, the Burnsville Education Association. It does not impact reductions in any other areas.
So teaching staff only?
Teaching staff only, and it allows us to carve out certain areas, again, to protect programs so that seniority tenure doesn't kick in for these different areas because of the certifications. So again, the objective criteria that we can use to classify these teachers, these groups.
Is this mainly in at the high school level primarily? We don't have any?
Well, high school is where we have the specialized pathways and college and schools and CTE type programs. However, the dean positions, if a person is a dean, that could be at the middle school level as well.
Okay.
Well, I think largely it's to protect the pathways program in general because that is such a niche to our district, and so it's something we want to maintain.
Right, where we have only 1 or 2 teachers in a pathway. If they happen not to be senior in the department, this protects them and the ability for us to be able to continue offering those classes.
Yeah, I think that's the evolution of how it's been applied. I don't think we'd be a little lax in remembering that this was an item that we won in bargaining is in exchange for something else. And it is one step in helping us have some control over the inflow and outflow teachers. But primarily in our situation, its purpose and utilization is pathways. The language is fairly restrictive in what we can apply it to.
And I guess my only request, Stacy, is that, if you identify any adds that you want to make to that, recommend to the list, that we be given the opportunity to, have a workshop in August before we take formal action to discuss any changes.
If any of the administrators or anybody else brings forward something that we would be able to, again, put into a format that is objective, with specific criteria, we most definitely would present that information before we ask for action.
Great, thank you.
Okay, no further questions around the matter? Okay. Thank you, Stacy. The next item we were going to discuss a little bit about tonight was board goals. I believe last year was, well, yeah, I know for a fact last year was the first time that we had board goals. We went through a process of creation of those. Just to remind us that, and Director Earl helped me out, I believe the 3 goals we had was the onboarding, the board members as ambassadors, and the strategic plan, aligning our work to the strategic plan.
Yes.
So we are come again time, much like probably are at your employer. It's time to do those goals again. So, we'll just, I'd like to have a sort of an open conversation. I'm just going to kick it off a little bit so we're not just sitting with white space in front of us. I don't think we need the onboarding thing. We kind of knocked that out of the park and cleaned that up. Be my personal opinion to at least talk about moving forward or maintaining the board members as ambassadors goal, and the strategic plan aligning with board work also, because that's kind of an ongoing thing. In board book, you'll see that we did have the current the version of the strategic plan that we just finalized a meeting or so ago. I'd be looking for additional ideas around board goals. These are goals for us, obviously. We did have some conversation about last year, just so you catch up, that we want to ensure that these goals are really for us and not putting on excessive or new work or on Dr. Battle or her staff per se. I mean, a little bit the onboarding kind of ended up doing that a little bit, but a couple of topics off my head. We have this we've already engaged in this cultural proficiency work that we've been doing with between CPSS and the IDI and the programs we're going to be doing with the Y. I would suggest we can work that language in there somewhere. It's a little bit of a softball, but it's something we're working on already. And then I would also entertain the idea of talking a little bit more about the land building stuff we have going on, and just getting, setting a goal to get somewhere with that. So facilities, yes. So that's a couple things I had on the top of my head. I'm opening it up for conversation about those and other items. Anybody?
I had the same thought about the cultural proficiency suggestion, since we are investing a fair amount of time and effort into it this summer, so it totally makes sense.
Okay. I'm a little bit, I don't want this to be turning into a night of word workshop, where we're writing goals. So somehow we have to maybe defer this to, I don't know, either somebody else does it, or Leslie and I will do it, or something. Somehow we'll accomplish the actual wording of the goals. And maybe we can put something together and then have it in board book, because we approve these at our next meeting or our ABE meeting. Yeah, that's how
We take action.
we take action on them. So if there's some give and take on that, we certainly, words you want to remove or add or whatever, we could redo them, or we could make a document for
Or
that.
it could be a report that's just presented and we, generally
But the
comment.
actual creation, we could get a document going, and then they could be available for editing. But let's get back to the point of, so that are we in agreement? The cultural proficiency one seems like a apt thing to add to the list. We're in agreement, we're striking the onboarding one, probably. I mean, that documentation is done and in place. You guys have no idea what you benefited from that.
I agree. With next year being an election year, we may want to revisit it in a year.
Okay.
Good
In
point.
advance of an election, in case we get another
Okay.
several new members.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys can,
Right.
obviously offer a mountain of insight, having been through it and experienced what we produced, so. But for the time being, we will strike
I'm
it.
fine with not doing it this year.
All right,
And in terms of cultural proficiency, if we start with the core values, the statement that's in the core values, and kind of apply that to us, that might be an easy starting point.
Oh, instead of like our school community, say like we as a school board will work to understand our assumptions and biases, making a commitment to value and manage cultural uniqueness and adapt to education to meet the needs of each student.
Done.
Leslie to write our goals.
There he goes.
all right.
And if there's anything specific that people want to add beneath that, but
Some of our markers would be doing the equity lab, the IDI,
Right.
how we have communication as a group, and you have another group.
yeah.
Okay. So, and then the facilities, something about that?
Probably something, correct me if I'm wrong, but we need to be ready in October, right?
Yeah.
Our legislators have told us that they would like us to contact them.
So maybe that's kind of our, the T in SMART for us, at least, one of the, the milestones that we need to meet. I know the legislative committee has been working on this, so you guys would kind of be the lead, but, maybe some more figure out the conversations that we need to have.
Okay. So if we have those, the ones on the table right now, we would be at 4. We were at 3 last time, which is fine. I will open up if there's any new things out there that I haven't thought of. I don't know. Be the dominating one. Okay. Anybody want to volunteer to be the initial author on these? Huh?
As long as we're not changing the last, the other two.
I don't think we need I don't think there needs to be any change on those.
As ambassadors, is there a statement that?
Yeah, I have the original doc. It was, well, this was for Scott and Leslie to work specifically, but the goal was to work with communications director to clarify and specify the board's role in supporting efforts to increase district enrollment. So it's about the whole thing that we're losing students and that we need to be somehow in front of that and supporting them.
And so like how can we, attending various activities at the schools, in the community, so we talking positively with community members about our schools, and then also if we have our own social media platforms ourselves, that we're sharing the messages of the district out to within our social media activities as well. That's in the next slide?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you left anything out, but I think that's the gist of it.
Okay. All right, so Leslie, maybe you'll bring it together and then we'll get a shared doc that we can all review and remove things if need be. Okay.
I have another suggestion about the ambassadors, but should we just wait and do that?
So like a tactical suggestion?
Yeah, I thought it kind of was. Maybe concentrate on or try changing the mindsets of the community by showing different ethnic groups so that people are more educated and more interested instead of, because people, are generally afraid of what they don't know. And if they know stuff and see things, like, can I have a cultural day or something like that? Where, people go through different things and get to see origins of whatever, speech, dance, talking, clothing, language, whatever they want to display. And, so people can maybe get a little more open-minded, because they're just so, some people are just so closed-minded, just because they don't know.
Sure.
And they don't think about what they don't know, because they don't care that if it's in front of them, and then they're like, oh, that's what that's about,
Sure.
Like, a lot of people don't know about the Muslim community for different reasons, but just, and people should maybe be more aware of their holidays and what they're about, if you want us to know. Sometimes it's a closed community, I don't know. But that's just an example. Maybe.
Yeah, no, I understand. And we've done a few things like that here in the past. Of course, COVID shut all that down. But, in applying that to what were the board goals, I think what we would say is like, okay, so maybe we would host as a board something of that nature, or look at being sponsors of something like that.
And where they're, like, I know each of the elementary schools in particular have their own tradition around a cultural day or an international celebration where it's kind of a school community, and that's something that, certainly, and the middle schools too, I know Eagle Ridge had one. Those are opportunities for us to, get out and, be supportive in the schools. And also the International Festival, the City of Burnsville's International Festival is another, it's another way that we can show support too.
When does that take place?
July. I don't know if it's taking place this year, but it's always like mid-July.
It says they're doing a hybrid international
Oh,
festival
does it?
in
Okay.
July.
And I think there's 2 other events, Aaron, Juneteenth.
Virtual events and in-person events.
Juneteenth, and there's another one they just announced
Oh, and this is
too.
Pride Month too.
So,
But just in general, us being present in these type of events, I think can carry a lot of weight, and word gets around. And I know that we are looking at, wanting higher enrollment. And I know within the Somali community, words get around really fast. And if they see one of us at one of the activities or events, it really translates in a very positive way. As far as, for instance, Eid coming up, I think sometime in August or September. And I know the YMCA tends to do a lot of events around that time, and just being mindful of that. Because like I said, just the little things, honestly, that can carry big weight in certain community as mine.
Well, and now that things are starting to open up, I was just looking at my notes from when we did this last summer, and everything's like, once schools reopen, track how many visits the board members are making to schools, and track community events we're going to. And so far, for most of us, it's been 0.
Right, yeah, totally.
I've been to 2 graduations this week, and those are probably my first 2 events that I've gone to as a school board member in a year and a half.
Right.
And it's important for people, whether it's, the graduations or the school events. It's important for us to be out there so that they know we're not just sitting in here making decisions.
Right.
I'll never forget the first time I ran, a teacher telling me that members of the board who are no longer on the board had not been in a school in 10 years, which I can believe. And I was just shocked. Part of it is because I still had a kid in elementary school at the time, so I couldn't imagine not being in school every week. But now that I've been in it, I can see how easy it would be to get detached having.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's really important that as things are opening up, that we are finding the time, making the time to get in when we are able to.
Some communities feel it more than others.
What's that?
Some communities feel more than others.
Sure.
That they're not being seen, or they're not interacting with one of us or whatnot.
Right.
And they seem to really appreciate when they do see us. I mean, I've had so many teachers thank us for coming to their graduation. It's like, wow, okay.
Everybody's just so happy to see
Yeah.
It makes a big difference.
It does, yeah.
And there's always something, at least I know depending on the event, I bring something back here, right, to the work. It's not just appearances. It's, getting in conversation with people and hearing them, good, bad, and,
Right.
good, bad, and indifferent. Okay, share with me what you're thinking, and that's kind of something that I bring back here.
Yep, because we're here as a community. The community is the families, and the families are the parents of the students, and, so it all connects. And we're for the students. We gotta know, we gotta connect.
Okay. We will move that forward. And then finally, Dr. Battle.
Yes, so thank you. So I put forward 2 personal development goals, and I was greatly influenced by our first retreat with the YMCA, and looking forward to the rest of our interaction with the YMCA. So the first goal actually is related to getting to that highest level on the continuum of cultural competency, and that's adaptation. And in adaptation, they really talk about you can link your knowledge, your own knowledge of your culture, with other cultures, and to have that shifting perspectives. And then I gave you 2 examples for evidence of performance, and so it really builds upon the conversation you just held. So learning about constituents' cultures through dialogue and planned intercultural experiences, so going out into the community. So in addition to some of the ones you shared, I think they just set the August 3rd as National Night Out. And so, there's a whole system to that we'll get accustomed to.
And pre-COVID, we had a lot of board participation.
Yeah, we did.
So, and I went out too in different neighborhoods. I went with Burnsville Police Chief Tanya Swartz and officers.
Yeah, I got to ride with the
SROs.
K-9 unit. It was really a lot of fun.
Yes. And then just give you examples of how I'm moving toward adaptation in planning, decision-making, and implementation, and plans and review of policies and practices. And then the second goal I felt should continue from what I said this year, because I believe it's so important, our partnership, is to continue growing our relationship and learning about each other.
Right.
And working towards the children and the families and the communities we serve. And so I gave 3 ways I could show evidence of performance, and it's continuing the monthly one-to-one meetings, and then continue to attend MASA and AASA conferences. So that's my professional as superintendent, and MASA also includes directors of special ed. And so really, they always, as a standard, have board relations and superintendent of directors, because they know the importance of the partnership. And then participate in board retreats with you, because we should grow in our knowledge together and our experiences. So that's how you really grow. The strengthening the relationship is having some common experiences, just as you just said, Director Connor. People don't know what they don't know until they start to interact, and so the board retreats.
Thank you. Dr. Battle, thank you. All right, group, I'll open it up for a conversation.
I think the first goal makes complete sense, and I really like the fact that, we just came up with our own goal on cultural proficiency, because then we're in alignment, together, and that kind of feeds into the second goal as well. I don't know where it fits in, but I think I'll go back to, I would like to see, we have different staff in our district who undergo evaluation, and I would like to have a goal for Dr. Battle in which she creates SMART goals and an evaluation plan for this year for her direct reports as well as for district leadership. I think, if we're really going to meet our goals as a district, we need to have our leaders evaluated in the same way that, each of us would be evaluated at work as well. And I know it's, you know, it's a long time coming. I would aspirationally like to see that happen, you know, the first evaluation happen at the end of, you know, this next school year. But I just want to put it out there for people to think about.
Sorry, Abigail, are you talking in terms of teachers? Or what, for the
So teachers are evaluated. I'm talking about, so we're responsible to Teresa, right? Her direct reports, her cabinet, is what, and district level staff,
So
right?
Assistant Superintendent Gersich would get a performance review.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And directors, and they don't currently have SMART goals. They don't currently undergo a formal evaluation process. And I think that would really make a difference for us in terms of people knowing, you know, okay, specifically, this is what I'm going to be evaluated on. And we do it elsewhere in the district, so I think it just makes sense.
I think it'll give you a better, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So Stacy is still here, just some information for you to consider if you do make that one of the goals. So currently, our principals and teachers have an evaluation system. And then as the two directors said, my direct reports, and their direct reports do not. And so Stacy Silva and I, we have been researching evaluation systems. And so the note that you must understand, because they are in a bargaining group, it's a negotiated process. So that would take some discussion from you.
But your cabinet isn't.
Right.
No, excuse me, the one group, I'm sorry, the district-wide administrators.
District-wide administrators, yep.
So Stacy, I don't know if you want to add in, so you have to consider that piece too.
So would Dr.
For the
Battle
one
be
group.
evaluating them, or would the school board?
No, the school board would not evaluate.
Oh,
No,
okay.
that's on her. We're just setting a goal for her to.
Right, okay, I just want to make sure I understood what you said, okay.
We only evaluate the superintendent.
Yeah,
But
Yeah,
you could provide us a report in
A
terms
report,
of the performance of her team.
And so I just wanted to point out for one of the groups, thank you, there's a part you play that I'm not the negotiations part.
Yeah.
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 And I would say even in the scenario where, if it's unable to have an evaluation, at least creating a culture of goal setting would be an objective.
Yeah.
So that, you know, people, and
most
maybe they're
important thing.
aligning agreement. So it can, you know, goals should be beneficial for both parties, right? It allows the manager to know what they're working on, but it also allows the recipient to know what's expected of them, so.
So it's written in the BEA and like the principal's bargaining unit,
Well, actually, state
negotiations,
law,
performance reviews?
performance is state law. That's why Stacy is still there. I don't know if you want to weigh in. So it's state law to have a teacher evaluation system.
Yeah.
But it'd have to be, but because of the other bargaining unit, it's
But
not
then we have to
law,
negotiate the terms of that evaluation system.
So maybe where we can start is where we do start is where we can, which is
Yeah.
with the cabinet. I mean, because
Right.
the.
Yeah, cabinet,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. If they're not in a collective bargaining unit, because we don't, the suggestion isn't meant to open up.
Yeah, overturn the union.
No, but
Yeah, I get it now.
it's hard to evaluate, at least how somebody's doing on the job if all they have to do is negotiate a raise.
We're going down a slippery slope.
Sorry,
Yes.
but I'm trying to
Yes,
understand, because my.
there's
I've
a
not
structure
worked-
to,
I don't have a history of working with
Yeah.
bargaining units, so.
but there is a legal requirement for teacher evaluation to meet the standards of the Minnesota Department of Education, and we have negotiated the methodology to that, correct? The pro pay that we just talked about is a big component, or part of that, so. All right, any other ideas for Dr. Battle for our goals? I personally like the one that Director Alt has brought forward. I would, venture, the idea of something that is fairly tactical. I know the dashboard, for instance, is something that we've been looking for, setting the expectation, something like that, that's something that gets done, so that sometimes some of these things can be nebulous in their interpretation, because Dr. Battle is something that can be accomplished black and white, it's either done or not, or
Well, isn't the
caveat.
dashboard included in your strategic plan goal for FY '22?
So if you look at the MSBA, now do I have the tool in front of me?
Yeah.
Strategic plan is one of those.
The dashboard might be included, I mean, if it is included in that, we can,
Examples of meeting that goal.
or we can just strip it out and make it its
in the
own.
governance.
Because the dashboard is something that definitely needs.
Okay, all right, well then,
Yeah.
unless there's something else we can think of,
I think that's a good one.
Can you raise graduation rates? Just kidding. I'm not gonna make that a goal for you.
But it actually is really tied to how we're going to use some of the ESSER funds.
Yeah.
So to deal with that, because we think there's been an impact to that. So, yep, more to come. Yes.
All right, are we then agreed that the 3 would be the goals for Dr. Battle?
We might want to double check on that dashboard though, right? I mean, is that, just make sure that that is part of the
I don't have the tool in
MSBA?
front of me, but I
Okay.
think it's in that MSBA, so you could have it there in the MSB one.
Okay.
Also, like if we're evaluating on all 25 factors again.
Yeah, so if
it
you
shows up
do
there.
that again, yeah, or you can
Okay.
pick the ones that have the strategic plan embedded.
All right,
I'd like to shorten the 25
all right, any final thoughts?
You have
Evening?
it complete.
All right, another long day, and evening, but thank you. Better than being outside. We're done, thank you.
Okay, thank you.